You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 20th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend Peter Parker. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Alright, Peter sat in his chair, looking over the blueprints, all of them displaying various ideas that he had devised in an effort to enhance his spider sense. So, the suit I want to make needs to accommodate my sense of touch. He turned around in his chair. You know, when Aizawa made Hero Period a time for you guys to train. This is not what I expected a student from the hero course to be doing, Power Loader mused with crossed arms. He said that we should use the period however we can to become better heroes. Peter shrugged, and this is one of them. Before coming to UA, I made a lot of my own gadgets. Did you mentor with someone? Melissa asked from her side of the room. Or work with a support company in the States. Peter's mentor, the late metal maestro, passed away sadly. Heart disease. Karen spoke from Peter's phone from where it rested on the table. Peter felt a buzz and looked down at his smartwatch. Was a confirmed hero who passed 3 years ago. Based in New York too. Atta girl Karen. Peter mentally cheered. So, the American muttered, turning about. Going by everything. We can eliminate some of the heavier and bulkier stuff. He began to gather up some blueprints, tossing them into the holographic trash bin. You want materials that can more easily translate your sense of touch without fully exposing your skin. Power Loader mused. One hand rising to cup his chin as he eyed the blueprints. Don't suppose really thin socks would work? Melissa asked as she sipped from a thermos of tea. Not enough protection. Even if I avoid all the glass. Just pavement alone would tear up my skin and the socks after a while. Peter mused. Maybe something as thin as sock linen but more durable. I know Mount Lady's suit is what I would like to get. But when she told me how much it costed, she's still paying off the loan needed to buy the material for her support company. He heard the microwave ding, making him perk up as he raised his hand, his web shooters attached as he aimed. He fired. With a light tug opened the door and with another raised arm, latching onto the paper-shielded hot pocket inside, bringing it to him as he caught it. Eck! He immediately cried as he set it down on the desk. Hot. Can you not please? Power Loader asked, seeing the 2 strands of webbing on the floor. Peter blushed bashfully. Sorry, he yelped before reaching up to rip the webbing free and moving to toss it in the trash after bunching it into a sticky ball. As his hand rose up he paused, staring at the ball in his hand. That's it, Peter exclaimed, beaming as he turned around, using the keyboard in front of him to write up a new blueprint as he began to type. What did you figure out? Melissa asked, looking confused. What is thinner than polyester, but can allow my foot to breathe and be protected? Peter began to write down the chemicals needed for web fluids, listing them down practically by heart. My web. If I can make a material like it, but used only for my feet, then I will be able to use my spider sense to the fullest. But doesn't your web fluid make it so that it evaporates after a period of time? Power Loader inquired. It does, but that's because of a dissolving agent. Just eliminate it and the webbing can last for days, almost weeks before it degrades. He explained. I ran a simulation featuring every various chemical compound and protein, and I may have found the right one. Karen added, and Peter could see out of the corner of his eye modifications being made to his formula. He grinned. Seems like you got the hang of things, Peter, Melissa added with a small smile. Now to get back to my own project. Got to find the right kind of gear for him. For who? Peter asked, focused on his blueprint as he minimized windows and began to create the skeleton basis for his new web grenade. Izuku, I'm trying to come up with the right kind of tools to help support him in the field. Peter turned his head, seeing Melissa at work on her own station and the holographic blueprint before her. He could see it in motion, the glove expanding and contracting. It started as something that would only cover the hand, then expanded to cover the forearm in a bulky kind of protection. Well, I know Midori is a frontline fighter, and while he's good at Parker, Peter mused aloud. He may need something to help him with movement, and something to help subdue enemies too, Melissa added, before turning to get back to work. Okay, Peter studied his new blueprints, one featuring the bare bones of his new suit, the other listing the bullet points for his new web bombs. Go time. Mount Lady sat on the ledge of the building, munching on a hamburger as she looked out over the skyline of Musutafu. Above her, leaning against a billboard of Uebami selling her newest skin lotion, Kamui Woods rested while sipping from a thermos that he had brought along. She wiped her mouth a little, looking out beyond Musutafu, and seeing the massive skyline of the greater Tokyo area far in the distance. Today was like any other with Peter at school and her on the job. She would transform in a wide area, smash any sort of unruly villain or punt them to the next county, while Kamui would handle any kind of criminal in environments that would be hazardous for her quirk. Something, however, was at the front of her mind as she ate. If it's true, and at the absolute least Parker believes it to be true, coupled with the events he's gone through within his time in UA, despite what you may think he might need more help than he's letting on. The constant insomnia from before the USJ, the fact that he's been here for over a year, and the fact that he hasn't gotten anything close to treatment regarding what happened to him on Titan. This issue might point to larger problems brewing under the proverbial hood. You've been letting him sit on a landmine, and that is on you. You glared at the card, hoping she could find a way to voodoo doll Aizawa somehow just to spite him. You're his guardian, so start acting like it. Hey Kamui, you spoke up, looking up and seeing her colleague look down at her. Go ahead on the route without me. I'll catch up. Why's that? You pulled out her phone and began to dial in the number on the card. Family issue. All right. He got up, giving her a nod. I'll meet you by the bridge. He pointed, you seeing a bridge a good 4 miles down the river which went out to sea. Thanks. You smiled, relieved as she brought the phone to her ear, and got up, beginning to pace along the rooftop under the bright blue sky. Kamui nodded, stowing his thermos as he lashed his wood tendrils out and began to swing about town. What to say for introductions? Hey, my student's dick of a teacher recommended you to be his shrink, wanna discuss rates? No. Be more formal, polite, then she might get asked where she got the number, and she wasn't in a mood to glow about Eraserhead. She heard the dial tone ring once, twice, thrice. Hello, this is Tyler Terra. You perked up, saying their name in a Western fashion with the surname last. I am currently on vacation at the moment. Her voice also sounded a bit older too, mid-40s. Shit, you muttered aloud as she leaned against the back of the billboard in the shade, sighing as she gazed upwards. Feel free to leave a message after the beep, and if this is an order on plushies, be sure to leave your email so we can talk business. What the you muttered, blinking in surprise before she heard the tone. She coughed a bit. Hi there, my name is Takayama Yu and I got your number from my ward's teacher who. She licked her lips, pointed me your way. For the record, that teacher's name is Aizawa Shouta, if that rings any bells. Here is my number. She gave it before sighing. And just call me back when you can and we can set something up. Thanks. She hung up and let out a big sigh, running a hand down her face. If Aizawa made me spill my heart to a plushie maker, I swear to God that I'll punt him to Australia. There was a beeping sound. Looking down, she tapped on her smartwatch communicator and pocketed her phone, walking back to her burger and munching on it. Yeah, villain near downtown, Kamui said. I'm gonna direct it to the river. It's a giant snake. I hope you finished your business. You scarfed down her sandwich. Lead him on, Kamui. I'm in a mood to vent my frustrations. Just muzzle him, will ya? You saw a coiling tail in the distance, and she got to the ledge, jumping off and transforming to her 64-foot height. Time for me to kick some ass. The walk out of the hospital was a familiar sight. Enji kept himself somewhat casual, no flames, just him. Flames in an open building in front of her wouldn't do anyone any good. A few people walking through recognized him, taking pictures with their phones, but did their best to keep the hell out of his way. He wasn't in armor or costume as well, but his face was a dead giveaway. A spark at his side, and Enji felt his quirk spike up the fire on his face. He specifically requested not to be disturbed until the afternoon. Yet, when he reached for his phone, the call wasn't from the agency. It was the emergency line, indicating a disturbance. What? He asked. Gang war. About 2 miles away southeast at 99th Street and Kazuki Avenue. You're the closest hero to respond, and wait, is this Endev? His clothes burned off, revealing the black skin suit he kept under them as his flames roared around his shoulders, fists, and feet. The buildings became blocks under him as he soared through the air, only to drop down as gravity forced its hold back on him. The address updated as he got closer, moving him closer to an alleyway. A single jet of flame adjusted his course, and a slow exhaust of power set him down on the edge of the alley. The alley itself was off the beaten path, the sort of place where muggings would occur and desperate scum with knives tried their luck. Now though, there was no one around, and for good reason. He could see the bullet holes along the walls as cracked concrete pointed towards a battle, firearms and quirks being used in equal measure. Yet no bodies, no corpses, no remains splattered against the walls, not even pools of blood to indicate any casualties. On one hand, it was a good thing. The fewer deaths, the less paperwork required. Only, this was the 10th battleground in the last month alone without any victims. It shouldn't be possible for things to be so clean. 3 months ago, these streets would have a possible homicide every other week. Now, there wasn't even a stray mugging or a petty theft to be seen. It was like someone was going down and taking out every single member of the gangs before just leaving the battlefields as a calling card. First suspect on the list could be the League of Villains. Nothing publicly had happened with them since the Hasu incident, but the leader had a quirk that could turn people to dust, ideal for getting rid of evidence. Endeavor pulled out his phone, clicking the signal for a first responder team. He'd have to ask for specialists to measure the dust, just in case. And if it wasn't Shigaraki, then whoever did this had a body count well into the dozens. He entered the warehouse, seeing more destruction. Boxes and crates were strewn about, a fact he glanced over before he noticed some blood on the floor. A crime scene. This is Endeavor. At my signal I want to report a disappearance. Evidence of another disappearing gang is present. Send local forensics teams my way. Understood, sir, the dispatcher said on the other line. Shigaraki Tamura could turn people into ash, yet he saw no piles of ash anywhere. Endeavor began to walk about the warehouse, seeing no signs of security cameras. Looking at some of the crates and boxes, he peeled some open, reaching down and finding copy paper. Yet under it, he saw a powdery substance. He got his communicator out again. This is Endeavor. Bring the narco unit as well. Whatever our disappearing gang was doing, they were running drugs. Something caught his eye near a destroyed crate with paper and white powder spilling out as he walked over. He knelt down, seeing what looked like a few yen bills and a photo. He leaned down before looking at it, the picture depicting a rather unsavory-looking man looking annoyed with his head full of screws. He was at a family gathering of rather pleasant-looking people. A woman that might be his mother with her hair being made of nails smiling and serving him some food. A happy family, -1 in their lives for the moment. They're disappearing without being held accountable and facing justice. NG spoke. It's like they're being treated as dust being swept up in a pan, not as people. He reached for his utility belt that he had around his waist and grabbed a plastic bag and marker. He could hear the sirens of the first responders in the distance. May, you're supposed to order ice cream, not dismantle the guy's freezer. Peter wasn't sure whether he should be laughing or cringing. Maybe both. But it had a squeaky cooling fan. She protested. It did. But the freezer looked like it was older than both of them, judging by the make and model. The fact that it had been working at all was no small miracle, squeaky fan or no. Oh well, at least he'd managed to get what they came for. Holding out the still not melting prize, he smiled at the pink-haired inventor. Cherry. She smiled back, target-like eyes focusing on the frozen confectionery before she snatched it out of his fingers as Peter chewed a bit off from his mix of vanilla and caramel. Stuffing his free hand in his pocket, they made their way down the street. They had been banned for at least a week by his insistence with Power Loader from going anywhere near the studio, so she'd been predictably going stir-crazy inside her own home. When he'd called, she was busy turning her ceiling fan into a high-powered rotor blade system to help people swim faster, or mow down seaweed, either or. While he was happy to see his enthusiastic if a little psychotic friend, he made sure to discreetly watch her out of the corner of his eye. Her skin had returned to a healthier pallor, back to its usual tan rather than the sallow pale he'd seen. But there were still dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, and he could only hope it was her usual restlessness and thoughts on inventions rather than other distractions. So, how's the vacation been treating you? He ventured, taking another bite. May's scowl was thunderous, insofar as the perpetually cheerful girl could look thunderous. It sucks, she declared flatly. I dunno why Power Loader said I couldn't be in the lab. I didn't even blow anything up last week ... that he saw at least. He decided to ignore the afterthought there. You needed the rest, he justified, subtly reminding the manic inventor of her previous unhealthy state. I need to get back to work. Support items don't make themselves, she contested, looking cross with a frowny face. Peter sighed, rubbing his forehead. May, I asked Power Loader to give you some time off. She whirled on him, popsicle still in her mouth as she made an attempt to speak while her mind looked like it had just blown a fuse. WHDYMJHNYDGHT. He nodded. You were working yourself ragged, May. I have to make the... He reached up, placing his hand on her shoulder as he looked at her. May, I know what happened at Island. Is something you're thinking about? He pretended not to notice her wince, shutting his eyes as he powered on through. But I'm not gonna let you end up hurting yourself because you wanna avoid me getting hurt. She looked down at the floor, and for a long moment she didn't say anything long enough that Peter began to grow concerned again. I'm not stupid. He blinked. I'm not saying. I know what people say. She interrupted, looking back up at him with eyes that had just the barest hint of glass over them, her target irises focusing on him. That I'm crazy or airheaded, autistic, she spat out. That I can't keep my thoughts straight or focus. That I don't know when to go home and stop inventing things. But I'm not saying any of that, he protested, bewildered. Her response was an accusation. You're saying that I don't know me. I know my limits. I know how much I can handle, she yelled, her previous excitement replaced with offense and anger. And I can handle whatever I need to make sure you're not filled with bullet holes again next time you go out. His face fell. You don't have to do it all at once. I'm not planning on getting into any gunfights. You didn't plan to get into the first one either, she shot back, eyes whirring in their target pupils. 376%. Peter blinked. What? That's how much higher your statistical probability of being in a dangerous situation involving villains is next to the national student average, she muttered, looking off to the side. He stared, utterly stupefied by that fact. There's a national average. There is now. She turned, eyes boring into him. You made one. Not the point. She stamped her foot, her eyes beginning to look moist. 376. And that's as a student. A first year. She turned away, clomping over to the side of the building they were next to before planting herself down on the steps, glaring at the floor. How much worse is it gonna be when you get into your second year? Or get a full-time internship in your third? Or when you graduate? I need to work. I need to get you the tools you need so you don't. She trailed off. So you don't. Her voice was shuddering. For a moment Peter stood there, half-melted ice cream in his hand as he lingered on the sidewalk, staring at May as he felt that pit in his stomach get bigger and bigger. Finally, after an interminable moment, he marched closer, sitting down beside the girl who didn't move. You're worried, he said. It was a stupid thing to say. Obvious, but this conversation hadn't really gone the way he'd expected. Saying it aloud let him organize his thoughts, what he could say. They lurched to the side suddenly, and before Peter could say or do much he was wrapped in a tight hug. One arm squished between them, her fingers clutching at his ribs as he used his remaining arm to awkwardly reach over and brush his fingers through her pink hair. Something to give her relief. I worry too, he admitted quietly, and I'm sorry I didn't even look for so long. But I do worry too, May. So let's make a deal. She sniffled into his shoulder and he took that to mean she was listening. I'll try to drop that average a bit, maybe down to say 250. He tried not to smile at the absurdity of the statement. And you work normal hours at the lab, okay? Normal hours for people or me? She sniffed, and he ignored the dampness spreading across his shoulder. Peter gave a soft smile, seeing her look back up. We can work on it, he promised. Before Peter knew it, the 3 weeks had passed in the blink of an eye. Something on your mind? Peter perked up, turning as he had been looking out the window at the Tokyo skyline going by. Seated beside him, Izuku sat with his hands in his lap. Around him, Peter could hear the banter of Mina and Kaminari. Across from him, Ochako seemed to be talking with Tsuyu, and out of the corner of his eye Momo and Shoto were discussing something quietly. Kind of. Just wondering what sort of exam it's gonna be. Peter mused. I mean, what sort of high school exam takes place in Olympic stadiums? He asked as the bus got off the freeway and onto the main street leading to it. Something like the sports festival maybe. Every exam is different from what I can tell. Every year those who failed usually come back to retake it. Izuku replied. I see. And what happens if you, well, don't pass at any of your attempts? Peter asked, seeing the stadiums grow bigger as they approached. Well, you won't be able to do significant hero work as a student save for internship duties. Izuku cupped his chin, thinking. Although I'd have to imagine you can still aim to become a hero. But without that experience and the boost that the provisional license gives on your resume, it would be a lot harder. So the ones who fail go out to the sticks. The sticks? Izuku tilted his head. Sorry, old phrasing back home. More like the country, out of the major metropolitan or town areas, like central Honshu or Hokkaido up north. Oh okay, I would think so. Izuku perked up. We're almost there. Peter turned, and he saw the bus pull up along a sidewalk which caused Ida to stand up near the front of the bus, Aizawa still sitting up there. All right everyone. Orderly lines. The bespectacled boy called out as Peter saw everyone in front get up to depart from the shuttle bus. Then they were out of the bus, standing in the courtyard of the Fujitome Stadium district. So this is where the Olympics are held in Japan, huh? Peter mused aloud. Yeah, and other sporting events or hero showcases nowadays. Due to the Olympics being completely quirkless, it's not that popular anymore. Ochako spoke out as they got off the bus. Kinda sad really. Geez, this is big, Ajiro said as he looked up at the stadium, seeing other buses filled with other students. Peter noted the various different school uniforms too, all of them forming their own little cliques. And there must be hundreds of other kids too. Can we really pass with all of those other guys? Sato asked. You will pass, Aizawa spoke out, or rather ordered, making the muscular boy turn back in surprise. Show no doubt and pass this exam. Once you do, you will no longer be considered just students. His eyes focused as he walked in front of the class, most of them standing by the bus to collect their costumes. You will be semi-pros, so do your best out there, all of you, he said, hands deep in his pockets. Yeah, that's right. We're all gonna pass here, Mina exclaimed, hands high above her head. And we'll show the world what we're made of, Kirishima said, just as eager as the pinkette. Peter chuckled in good nature. Let's give it a big plus. He readied his fist back to pump into the air. Ultraa. Eck, Peter yelped in surprise, skipping back at the sudden shout as he turned to stare at the source. Even Izuku backed off in surprise as Kirishima looked confused. Standing behind him was a taller-looking boy in a more casual school uniform that reminded Peter of the private high schools Midtown Tech would face in the academic decathlons, consisting of a simple collared shirt and slacks. He was built very well, and wore a cap with a unique S at the rim and had a large smile upon his visage. You shouldn't intrude on others, Inasa. Apologize, grumbled another as Peter saw him and a group of others approach, all wearing similar attire, caps and all. A boy, a girl, and some, for a person, reminded him of that furry guy in the Addams Family, the name escaping Peter. Oh, you're right, the boy said, his tone speaking as if he didn't know the concept of an indoor voice as he leaned back. He continued to lean back, and came down, the crown of his head meeting the ground as he stood. Sorry, Peter blinked, seeing everyone else around him was as perplexed as he was. Is his quirk being very flexible, or is he made of rubber? Peter asked aloud. He's like Ada combined with Kirishima, Cyril muttered. And not that loud, Kirishima exclaimed in defense, pointing at the boy as several others came to approach. Hey, doesn't that hat look familiar? It is, Shoto spoke up. They're one of the few schools in all of Japan that is capable of rivaling UA in the quality of its hero courses, he said, as the boy, Inasa, rose back up, the look of exuberance fading a bit as he focused eyes on the dual-haired boy. You're from Shiksu High. And Peter noticed the shift, the good nature fading into a glare as the other boy who had called out Inasa stepped forth, and Peter noticed his incredibly narrowed eye, his other covered by his violet hair. Seems like UA has arrived to suck up all the air again. As usual, he drawled with a hint of venom. Hey now, it's totes okay, Shishikura, the girl with blonde hair said. Like, you know he absolutely loves that plus ultra thing, you know, she said as her eyes drifted, and Peter felt her settle on him. Oh hey, the sports festival guy is here too. Peter blinked, seeing the girl approach. Like, totally hi there, she said in English, albeit accented. My name is Kami Utsushimi. She smirked, finger to her lips and winking. Like, so nice to meet ya, Peter Parker. Let's do our best, okay? That shirt hugging her form, and was that skirt a little too low? Or was that his imagination? Yeah, she looked nice. Very nice. Hi. Seems you know my name, Peter said with a wave, smiling awkwardly. Guess me winning is going to make it tough for me to introduce myself properly. Huh. He felt the stares at the back of his head too. Every time. Kaminari grumbled. I really should have done my best to make him lose. We don't stand a chance now, Zero added. Don't get the wrong idea, Parker, Shishikura said as he stepped up, standing in front of Utsushimi as he glared. We're not here to make friends with the enemy. We're here to become the best heroes, Inasa yelled, practically bulldozing Shishikura out of the way as he came forth and took Peter's hand, shaking it fast and wildly. It's an honor to compete with the best of the best, especially from a place like UA. I am Yurashi Inasa, and I am excited to work with or face you. But let's do our best at the end of the day and go plus ultra like the best heroes UA has made. Stop making friends, you fool, Shishikura barked, glaring at his taller peer, but Yurashi didn't seem to care as he continued to shake Peter's hand, his arm flailing in the process. Peter was wide-eyed as he shook the taller boy's hand. Yeah, of course. And nice to meet you too, Yurashi-san. Aizawa was silent, eyes fixed on Yurashi entirely. Easy now, Yurashi, you'll tear his arm off, the fur guy said as he approached. And don't mind Shishikura, he's just competitive is all, trying to put on a game face and whatnot. I'm Nagamasa Mori. He raised a hand. Oh, I am sorry, Yurashi yelled, letting go of Peter and bowing again with another blow to the floor. Dude, you don't have to do that, Peter exclaimed, seeing blood drip down Yurashi's face. Yet as the boy rose back up, he was completely unfazed and unaffected. Like, don't worry about it, we tried to get Yurashi-kun to stop, but he's like, super into that thing, Utsushimi explained. Like with UA, too. He's totally cray-cray about it. If he's into UA. A lot, Izuku said, stepping up as the blonde girl turned, and she smirked lightly. Oh, you're like, totes the kid who blew up his own fingers back then, didn't ya? Utsushimi beamed, leading his way, hands behind her back. Like, when did you have so many cuties? Izuku paled, becoming white as a sheet and shuddering on the spot. The girl only seemed to giggle and skip away from him, Shishikura growling in Izuku's general direction. Or Class A's general direction. That made more sense. We should get going too, you guys, Nagamasa said. Come on, we need to get back to our class. Yes, we cannot fraternize with the enemy here, Shishikura growled as he turned around and began to stalk off. Parker-san, gimme your number when we pass, okay? Utsushimi waved. Or fail, like, no diff to me, she said as she walked backward. Peter couldn't help but wave back, awkwardly and dumbly. Sure. Nagamasa bowed. If you'll excuse us, let's do our best, Yue. Irashi yelled, beaming as the other group marched off towards what seemed to be their bus. What's with those guys? Kirishima mused aloud. For someone who talks a lot about Yue, wonder why he didn't apply here. Jiru asked aloud. He did. Momo spoke up. He was in the recommendation exam with me and Todoroki. Her eyes were locked onto the retreating Shiksu students. He was, Shiro exclaimed. So he was as good as you and Todoroki. Takoyami muttered. If not better, Aizawa spoke up, eyes locked onto the Shiksu students, primarily Irashi. He was able to pass the exam, yet he left for reasons unknown. The man had a stern look on his face. That boy will be problematic if you face him in battle. He turned back to the class. Take note and be on guard. He's the real deal. You sure? Shiro asked. With those blows to the head there might be brain damage. Like serious brain damage. Underestimate him and lose then. Aizawa shrugged. I bet Ace here can beat him. Or even Todoroki too, Kirishima said with a big grin. I mean, I don't know what he does, but hopefully we don't run into each other. Peter commented. Assume the worst, hope for the best. Aizawa replied. That's all I can say when you're dealing with a monster like Eraser. Aizawa's face flinched, and his shoulders slumped as he let out a very frustrated sigh. Crap, he uttered, and Peter looked past Aizawa, as did Kirishima, Izuku and the others. Approaching with a wave and the biggest grin from the other direction was a woman with green hair under an orange bandana, and a unique costume with Jester's pantaloons. It's been so long. All I've been seeing is you being on TV and stuff. Doing well, she chirped, voice full of enthusiasm as she seemed to beam like the sun. While Aizawa looked like he wanted to be as far away as possible from her. Yes, wanna get married? No. And the girl barked out in laughter. Anyone ever tell you were good at off-the-cuff comedy? And has anyone ever told you that your sense of humor falls flat? Joke. He asked rhetorically. Who's she? Peter asked aloud, utterly stunned by the ongoing interaction. Oh, that's Ms. Joke, the smile hero, Izuku explained, looking excited. Her quirk is outburst and it allows her to force others to laugh uncontrollably. She's an expert in villain suppression. Hee, come on Aizawa, she said, playfully elbowing the gloomy shaggy-haired man. Think of the happy and vibrant house we can have. Always full of laughter and joy. Our kids would just be bouncing off the walls. That sounds like an insane asylum. Joke let out a laugh again at that. Are you friends? Suyu asked in curiosity. Oh yeah, me and Aizawa go way back. We did so many underground cases. We both neutralized so many criminals it was gut-bustingly funny. Joke explained with a beaming smile. Your quirk was efficient, Aizawa uttered. And on top of the countless times we saved each other's backs, we totally have to settle down. Joke lunged to hug the man's arm who flinched, baring his teeth, eyebrow twitching. She then looked towards Peter and blinked. Hey you, Parker was it? Peter perked up. Man, everyone knowing who he is going to take getting used to. Gotta say, I like the material you exposed during the sports festival. Aizawa turned her way, eyes wide. Like come up and fight like a spider. That was hilarious. Well, it just came sort of naturally I guess. Whenever I fight baddies, my mouth just, doesn't stop. And don't let it stop, just keep the jokes flowing. Oh god, there's two of them. Shouta could feel the migraine starting to form already, teeth beginning to grind. I mean, how else are you going to enjoy the fight if people aren't loosening up a bit? Parker asked. Not like we can't loosen up, or is that a bit like being strung along? The boy holds a piece of webbing between his fingers, smiling without a care in the world. Well, unlike Aizawa, you won't get tangled up, right? Mrs. Joke added. Leave me out of this, the teacher pleaded. Why? Afraid that you'll get wrapped up? Peter asked, a slight smirk forming. I will give you extra homework. Shouta growled out. Oh, what's wrong, Eraser? Your undies all in a bunch. Joke asked. Parker sniggered, and Shouta began to glare at him. Hugh, Joke said with a pointed finger towards Shouta's face accusingly. I've kept this ray of sunshine from me, she said, wrapping an arm around Parker. Wanna trade? My American transfer student would be tailor-made for you. Glum, gloomy, moody, and super serious. She spoke in a mocking tone, making Parker let out a small laugh. Okay everyone, Shouta said, voice raised, glaring at his class as his hair began to wave about. We're going to get signed in. Now, he turned around, and he looked back at Parker, who was standing by Joke's side. You need to tend to your class as well, Joke. I have a good class rep. But, fair enough. She walked over, patting him on the shoulder. Let's root on our kids together, K-H-N-M. And that is the code word for yes, Joke exclaimed as she walked off, leaving a befuddled class as they carried their costume cases. I like her, Parker declared with a grin, earning another glare from the man. There are 2 of them now. What have I done? Man, did you see the look on Aizawa-sensei's face? I don't think I've ever seen him so annoyed. Nina giggled. That means Ms. Joke and him make the best couple. You think that? Ajiro inquired. Oh yeah, like, he was totally brought out of his comfort zone, and she seemed to love working off of him too, warts and all. Momo paid them no mind, walking at the head of the class as she looked back, seeing Peter trot up to them with his costume case. Parker getting cozy with a hot teacher like that. Kaminari muttered. Lucky Sonu Vabich. Siro added. Do you 2 ever not think with your pants? Not even once. Kyoka snarked as they made their way to the locker rooms to change. They saw various other students from other schools going to their selected locker rooms, and Momo noticed a few of them staring at them. There were many kids of varying heights and dimensions, all in unique costumes and quirks on display. I can safely say that I've never been in a location with this many fellow students before. Ida surmised. Yeah, I feel it too, Izuku mentioned. Don't worry too much about it guys, Peter said as he finally caught up to the front of the group. Indeed, let's just focus on the exam for now, Momo breathed. Well, look who the cat dragged in, jeered a voice, making the group pause as they stared down the hallway. They found their locker rooms with the labels of UA, class of boys, and UA, class of girls written over the doors. But beside those, UA, class B boys, and UA, class B girls was present, and with it, Monomanito. He was dressed in a fancy suit, leaning by the door, leering their way with his arms crossed. I suppose it's to be expected that class A were to appear at this exam. Going to hog all the glory and attention as per usual, he drawled, several of his classmates beside him, all dressed in their hero costumes too. Monoma, please calm down. The pudgy boy, Nyanjiki if Momo's memory was correct, spoke. We're here to pass the exam, not cause a squabble. Oh please, like they'll do whatever they can to get to the top, even using others as stepping stones. Not unless we use them first, Monoma declared. Seriously, if you keep this up, I'll sick kendo on you. A short brunette with hair covering her eyes and wearing a red dress with white dots added. Heh, go ahead and tell her Komori. Not like I care. Monoma oiled. I'll tell Pony then. Monoma's jaw clacked shut as he looked back at her, thighs clenching lightly. You wouldn't. Keep acting a fool and I will. Who is he again? Siro inquired. I think he's the naked dude. Peter exclaimed. God, I remember you. You had to keep touching me back during the War of the Flags, Hagakure yelled, her gloved hand pointing his way. Pervert. I was doing what I could to win. Thank you, and you consented. Monoma rolled his eyes. You are still flashing people, like you are now. I was born this way. You can still wear clothes. Come along everyone, we should get changed, Momo said, dispelling a potential argument. The boy simply rolled his eyes before smirking, leaning against the wall and eyeing them as the entire group walked past. Okay, all set, Izuku said to himself, putting on his gloves and making the final adjustments as he looked around, waiting outside the hallway. Everyone was dressed up and ready in their costumes. They all got into orderly lines set by Ida as he saw Kirishima walk out of the locker room. Hey, check out Ace you guys, the redhead exclaimed as Izuku turned, seeing Peter walk out of the door. A new costume. It was mostly black save for the chest, forearms and legs with red gloves and shoes. Blue spider webbing traced along the red areas, and Peter had donned a red mask with blue webbing and blue trim around big white eyes. Izuku noticed the inclusion of pads around the elbows and knees, and the shoes themselves looked quite thin in appearance. Izuku even saw some kind of webbing on the arms connecting to his torso. The wrist web launchers looked modified as well, perhaps for more web or gadget compartments. Woa, is that a new costume Parker-kun? Hagakure said, her gloves floating close by. It seems so, Ida surmised. Yeah, made it myself during the last 3 weeks, Peter said through his mask, showing off his larger wrist guards with the modified web launchers on them. Oh, so that's why you weren't around for hero course training at the battle centers. You are making a whole new costume from scratch, Jiru asked, eyes wide. Very impressive, Peter-san. Momo mused, hand on her chin, looking over the outfit with a keen eye. I was wondering where you were. It seems you were making good use of your time. Peter's eyes crinkled and closed as he rubbed his head. I did have help from the support department here and there, but yeah, I needed a new costume since the other one was getting a little worn. I can't wait to see it in action, Ashido said, waving her arms. Well, if we all stick together, I'm sure we'll pass. Assuming we can stick together. Wouldn't surprise me if they split us up. Todoroki mused with crossed arms as he leaned against the wall. Agreed. Takoyami nodded. For now, let's get going everyone. Momo called out, and everyone in the class began to depart from the locker room down the hall, following the arrows that would lead out to the stadium proper. Coming, Peter trotted to the front, joining his fellow class rep. As they walked, Izuku began to run through the various possibilities going forward in his head, the gears churning and turning. The exam could be combat-oriented, or solving crime, or resolving a disaster. There were a lot of possibilities, but handling unexpected tasks was par for the course for a hero. Maybe there were scouts in attendance too. That could explain the stadiums with seating, and no massive audience or TV network set up. Could the exam have them respond to a disaster event in a stadium perhaps? Hence the selection of the site that had multiple stadiums for a second-rate global event. What if All Might was there and, "Yo, Midori," Peter spoke, hand on Izuku's shoulder as the boy perked up. "Why yes," he asked, turning as he saw everyone else looking at him. "It goes from the brain straight to the mouth, eh?" Kaminari smirked, and Izuku paled. "Oh, I was thinking aloud again, wasn't I? I wouldn't worry too much about it, Midoriya-chan," Tsuyu said with a light smile. "It adds to your charm. Helps to have someone thinking on point, I say." Hagakure waved her gloves, and Izuku blushed, looking away. "That goes double for me," Kirishima said with a beaming grin. "I don't usually think on that kind of stuff." "Don't sweat it." Peter's eyes crinkled up as he smiled behind his mask. The way his eyes curved reminded Izuku of Edge Shot. "Please take your tag." Izuku jumped as the rest of the group stopped. Before them, a small robot was carrying a massive cart filled with circular white tags, practically half empty already. "Please take your tag," the robot commanded. "It is for your exam." "Oh, well, that's sure." Ever the organizer, Ida rushed to the front to help dispense the tags in an orderly fashion, arms waving like an air traffic controller, handing everyone the tags as Izuku held up his. It had a metallic surface on one side and a soft rubbery face on the other. "Press the button on the side and write your name," the robot commanded, and Izuku looked on ahead, seeing the door leading out to the stadium. Izuku looked down at the tag, pressing the small button along the edge of the tag, and with it, a holographic screen appeared, alongside a similar holographic keyboard. Izuku filled in his name, pressing on the submit key as the holographic screen disappeared. Once complete, place your tag upon your chest or shoulder. Izuku nodded at the small robot's command, placing the tag's soft end upon his breast. He then heard a light suction noise and perked up. The tag was now attached to his chest with some kind of miniature suction or sticky function. Once complete, proceed to your school's section within the stadium stands. "Thank you for your cooperation." The robot then putted away with the cart, probably going to another locker room area. "All right," Kirishima cheered, smacking his fist into an open palm. "I'm getting antsy here. Let's get on with it," he exclaimed as the class began to walk through the hallway and out into the open stadium. It was large, capable of seating tens of thousands as it also had an open roof. Izuku looked about, seeing plenty of other schools and their students seated throughout the stadium, signs of the school names and their classes situated amongst them. Following the arrows, the students got to their section, noticing how sparse it was. Izuku noticed Class B close by to their own section, seeing some waves and stares directed their way. He noticed Peter wave, looking towards two people in particular, Tsunotori and Shizaki, sitting side by side as the former waved more enthusiastically, the latter more reserved. And of course Momo was there, smirking their way. As per usual it seemed. "Okay, now we wait, it seems," Izuku mused out loud as he took his seat, seated between Peter and Todoroki. Looking out to the green football field, it was pretty bare. But the video board hanging from the roof down into the stadium was on, with the logo and Japanese kanji of the Hero Public Safety Committee listed on it. Hey, Peter seemed to mutter under his breath, in English curiously enough. Izuku turned his way. "What's the HPSC?" he inquired to, seemingly no one. Yet before Izuku could reply, Todoroki spoke up. "It's a government bureaucratic agency that handles interactions between heroes and civilians," Todoroki elaborated. "They handle a lot of criminal cases too, alongside having a considerable sway with law enforcement and other hero-related matters," he explained, making Peter stare. Peter stammered in Japanese. "That's a good summarized version. Sorry, I was just, He tapped the side of his head, making Izuku tilt his head in confusion. Her, right, Todoroki surmised, understanding as Peter beamed. Why yeah, her, he whispered back in English. He turned around, seeing Izuku stare his way as he leaned over, was talking to Karen. He whispered, oh, can you talk to her? Izuku whispered back, Peter nodding in conjunction. She's not gonna affect the exam, is she? Nah, academic safeguard. Can't help with school stuff, Peter whispered back, to which Izuku nodded. Looking at Todoroki, he gave the barest of nods and sat back. He noticed Kaken standing up and walking down the aisle. Kaken, where are you going? Izuku asked as the blonde bomber kept on walking. Go into the fucking bathroom. Mind your own business, he grumbled back, not even turning around as he kept walking down the stairs and into the depths of the stadium. Izuku shrugged, sitting back in his seat. Hey everyone, look, it's starting, Hagakure called out as the giant scoreboard flickered to life. MGH, is this thing on? Muttered an old voice as the video feed came through, and with it, the visage of a very tired and gaunt-looking man with platinum blonde hair appeared on the frame. Ah, there we are. He leaned back, sitting on his chair. Judging by the background, he must be in the press boxes up top. Now then, he coughed into his hand a bit before rubbing his eyes. Welcome to this year's second Provisional Hero License examination. My name is Mira Yokimaru and I am your proctor. He let out a yawn. A pleasure to meet you all. He looks like he could use some shut-eye, Kirishima said behind Izuku. Think he and Aizawa-sensei could trade notes? Peter asked, eyes showing that he was smirking. Zero barely held in a snort. Mina audibly giggled while Momo smiled, rolling her eyes. My favorite thing to do is sleep, especially non-REM sleep, because I can certainly use that. Mira dawdled on, looking down at a script of sorts with the bare minimum of effort. Even with the salary I get, the workload can kill a man with how understaffed we are. It's ridiculous, he muttered. Ooh, he knows he's on camera, right? Uraraka mused aloud. Mira perked up, looking off-screen as he gave a light roll of his eyes. You heard me, Abe, he muttered before looking back at the screen. Now then, with my personal grievances aside, time to get to the meat and potatoes of this exam. As you all entered the stadium, one of the custodial droids helped dispense a certain tag to you. These tags will designate your teams for the preliminary exam, which I'll explain shortly, so pay attention boys and girls, you're not getting any repeats from me. Peter and the others of the class stiffened, watching as the man on screen adjusted his script and began to read. In this simulation you are members of a hero agency. Teams red, blue, green, violet, orange, yellow, pink, navy blue, gold, gray, brown, white, and black. Creative, Kaminari whispered before Jiru elbowed him. These agencies will each be working independently, and will be your agency from the beginning of this exam to its eventual conclusion a few days from now. Each will have a different number of heroes and resources to complete their task. The proctor yawned wide, closing his mouth as he rested his chin over his hand. A few days, Jiru squawked, of non-stop battle. Hagakure added. The task is simple, the proctor continued. Your agencies have received word of a terrorist attack that's going to take place. I bet we're gonna have to fight mock villains. Kirishima grinned. This is gonna be sweet. Yeah, I'll fry those robots to a crisp, Kaminari exclaimed, a small spark forming in his hair. And I'll melt him good. Ashido beamed, flexing her arms. So your job, boys and girls, for the first time the man seemed to smirk at the camera, is to read. It was somewhat amazing how far one could hear a pin drop when 400 plus students go dead quiet. Peter, equally as stunned, blinked. Not what he expected. Kirishima's jaw was on the ground. Ashido looked pale as a sheet with wide eyes, while Kaminari's classic dud face made an appearance, giving off a weak and confused way. Within your designated offices we've left all the materials you'll need to investigate the terrorist threat. Discover when, where and who will be leading the attack. The teams or team members who successfully determine who, what, when, where and how and arrive in time to intercept, well, they'll pass on to the next stage. Those that don't, fail. Simple really. Getting no response at all, he sighed before clearing his throat. Hope you all brought your thinking caps and reading glasses. We have prepared accommodations for you all to spend 2 nights here, along with food and running water within the trailers provided. For sleeping accommodations, the neighboring hotel has been booked for all of you. The contents within your lockers are being relocated to your rooms as we speak. The tag you have will essentially act as a de facto room key for your hotel room and your admission to and from this exam, so keep it on your person at all times. Naturally, if you feel the need to take a breath of fresh air or go for a walk, you're welcome to leave the trailer as well as your quote-unquote hero office. Mira paused to yawn and rubbed his eyes a little. In short, this preliminary exam is to give you all the experience of working at a hero agency along with the more technical aspects of hero work. primarily research and investigations, which can be quite time-consuming and difficult. As such, we expect you to work as hard as possible and resolve this threat from dusk till dawn. There was a sound, like grains of sand passing over glass, and Peter looked down. His white name tag shifted, showing his name and with it a number, 74. Hey, mine turned green, Kirishima shouted. And I'm 98. I'm red and 45. Tsuyu added. Izuku looked around, seeing that his classmates had a variety of different colored tags and numbers. Let me elaborate on the sorting of this exam, Mira espoused. We have a grand total of. He narrowed his eyes at the screen. My 405 examinees today, and you will be divided into major blocks depending on the colors. Your agency teams will also be dependent on the last number of your tag as well. For example, if you are gold 2, you are paired with gold 12, gold 22, and so forth. As I said, there will be uneven numbers of students among these groups to represent the dynamics of larger and smaller agencies. Likewise, you will be graded in the overall portion of the exam depending on how well you perform with your colleagues, whether it be in a small man team from out in the countryside, or a large established top 10 firm here in Tokyo. Beside Mira, a graphic appeared that showed the various other stadiums in the Fujitome district. This stadium you all are in currently is the white-black-gray stadium. All other students are to go to the other stadiums that are color-coded for your convenience. Simply follow the signs leading out of the stadium to your assigned one. The graphic showed the other stadiums and their outlines with a different color upon them, the stadiums almost being divided like a pizza being sliced. Please don't waste time. He yawned. We have a good 20 minutes for those who have to go to the other stadiums. Those who have white, black, and gray tags will remain here in your seats, please. The man yawned, resting his head in his arms. Well, guess we gotta get going. Ida stood up. I'm blue 61. Yeah, I'm pink 43. Momo turned towards the others. Do your best, everyone. We will, Peter said with a thumbs up, beaming at them as everyone began to stand up. Kick-ass Momo, he beamed, the girl nodding back with a smile. That goes for everyone. We will, Parker-kun, Uraraka exclaimed. We'll be pros in no time, ace. Kirishima pumped his fists up. See you, Todoroki uttered, standing up as Izuku noticed his tag was green 23. Izuku turned towards Peter. His tag was white, and his number was 34. Peter-san, we're in the same team. Izuku beamed, joy rushing through him as Peter turned, looking down at the tag on his breast and back to the green-haired boy. That we are, partner. We got this, he said, cheekbones rising in a grin as Izuku looked back as everyone else filed out. Guess I'm with you guys, Shoji said, his white tag reading 4. You too, sweet. Peter beamed. Guess so, Izuku said as he turned about and saw that everyone else had gone to the tunnel. Hey Shoji, guess we're working together again. Peter mused, looking back between Izuku and the taller boy. Indeed. All right, let's get to our trailer. Peter got up from his seat, Izuku smiling as he followed, with Shoji trailing from behind. They made their way down to the field via the stairs, navigating through the various large trailers and other gathering students to find their assigned location. 6, 7. Izuku turned around and spotted it. There, 4, at the edge of the arena. Yet already there. Izuku gulped. Such a tight bodysuit, and an unzipped outfit showing cleavage too. I'll look away, just don't pay attention. But she has her white 14 tag right on her BBB. Like, OMG, you're in my team too, squealed that girl from Shiketsu. Utsushimi beamed. Her figure almost seemed to bounce as she trotted over. I recognize the tall guy there, like who's Mr. Maskey here. She tilted her head, looking at the just as flabbergasted Peter. Hey Kami. Peter waved, his own eyes wide behind his mask. Oh, she batted her own forehead lightly. The spider motif was like a dead giveaway, might be there. She walked around, eyeing him up. Nice costume. Thanks, Peter muttered, looking about at the platinum blonde who was looking back up at him with a playful grin. It's like a bummer that our prelim is so boring. Why would they even design a test around reading? Like, we're totes heroes. Leave the reading stuff to like the unpaid interns, I say. Kami said with a nonchalant shrug. Crimes and threats don't investigate themselves, Shoji said matter-of-factly. The girl pouted while Peter shrugged. Kami's eyes looked to the sky as she HMM'd to herself. I guess so, but I'm like, totally gonna need help. I'm not the best in like, book smart, so, heads up, that's what teamwork is for. I hope you can help too, Izuku added, while the blonde girl giggled. Well, since you did ask so nicely, and the boy's attempt at trying to up her spirits suddenly became stiff as a statue at the girl giving him a wink. It's nice to meet you as well, Shoji added, offering his hand to shake as the girl looked at it and took it. Whoa, your hands are like super huge, she said, shaking them. And strong too. You totes like Yarashi, hitting the gym and getting those big strong muscles. I do. Shoji nodded, and the girl smiled back. Oh, we're not the first ones here, said a voice as Peter turned, seeing two people approach their direction. The first leading the way and with a bright grin was a tall, muscular young Japanese man with shaggy, unruly black hair, sticking up in all directions around his head which reminded Peter of Izuku. His brown eyes had unique diamond-shaped pupils as well. His costume consisted of a gold jaw guard around his cheeks, a thick green strap over each of his shoulders, attached at the front to two black plates with golden trimmings which covered the sides of his chest, black elbow pads, and green wrist guards. He had unique baggy pants with some small green markings and plain black boots with heeled soles. On his shoulder, the white 24 tag was present. Behind him was a girl with Caucasian features and a sour look on her face, one that reminded Peter of Mrs. Yaoyorozu in a sense. She had knee and elbow pads, and wore a light-fitting costume of knee-high boots, short shorts, and a tank top with what seemed to be body armor with an array of black with yellow trim. She also wore unique gloves on her hands too, her long dark hair down to her shoulders as her dark blue eyes scanned the crowd. Much like her compatriot, she had a white 54 tag on her shoulder. Whoa, I recognize those arms, the black-haired boy said. You're that armsy guy from the sports festival in UA, right? He asked. Yes, I am. Shoji nodded. Shoji Mizo. These are my classmates. He gestured to Izuku and Peter. Hiya, name's Peter, and this is Midoriya Izuku. Peter waved, and he saw the boy's face light up with a bigger grin. The girl with the frown perked up, gazing his way. Oh, you're the sports festival champ Peterparker, right? You must be the strongest one here. He ran up to them, shaking each of the boys' hands. And you can fire huge gusts of wind from your fingers too, right? He said, shaking Izuku's hand fervently. Ayu, not really. Just flicking is all BB, I got it under control. And no more finger breaking. Izuku said, his face showing a little unease. Man, UA sure knows how to put on a show with characters, don't they? That sports festival had me at the edge of my seat. He said enthusiastically. With how much talent you guys displayed, you guys ought to be fine heroes for tomorrow. He was really keen on smiling. You're making a big deal over nothing, the girl muttered, her Japanese highly accented. Peter could recognize it. American. Oh, don't worry about it. Oh right, where's my manners, haha. My name's Shindo-yo, and it's nice to meet you all. He gestured to himself with a thumb. And I'm from Ketsubutsu Academy, class 2-2, and this here is. As his arm went to the girl, she immediately glowered at him. L, she muttered. Just call me L. No last name? Izuku inquired, only to get a glare from the girl, and he promptly shut up. Oh okay, L-san. Shindo chuckled, shrugging. She's just really shy and doesn't like giving out her name. But she's from America and is super strong too. He turned towards Peter. Makes me wonder how if you two were to fight it out who would win. Well, hopefully we don't have to, assuming we pass the preliminary anyway, Peter said with hands raised. Elle noticed and scoffed. Scared? She asked. So like, am I chopped liver or something? Kami asked, finger pointed at herself. You might as well be Miss. Called out another name as Peter turned, and noticed two more figures approaching. You? Peter asked in surprise, and Monomanito smirked back. Your Honor, his eyes settled on the tag on Monoma's breast. It read White 64. Oh, of course, he sighed. He then noticed another individual beside him. Oh, hey Shizaki. Peter perked up, waving. He couldn't miss that vine-like hair belonging to Shizaki Ibara anywhere. Her costume looked relatively simple, a pure white toga of sorts as Ibara nodded. Parker-san, it's a pleasure to see you, she said with a soft smile. Monoma winced. Hey, don't buddy up Shizaki, Monoma exclaimed as he gave Peter a smug-looking grin. I don't suggest bonding with those three from class 1 of UA. Hi, Monoma drawled, running his hand through his blonde locks. All they will do is toss you down and step on you all the way to the top. It's what they do after all. I mean, did you see how he handled his own classmate during the sports festival final? Practically ripped his arm off for the win. He leered, grinning at him as Peter's eyebrow twitched. You really need to chill, dude, Peter muttered, and Monoma almost seemed to revel in it until Ibara stepped forward. Please forgive my childish and unwise classmates' ramblings on my behalf. Hey, Monoma cried out indignantly. Loud. Elle muttered under her breath. Who's he? Kami asked, pointing at the posing Monoma as she looked up to Shoji. Someone with an inferiority complex the size of Mount Fuji, Shoji replied through one of his arms. Kami perked up, eyes wide and amazed. Whoa, your arms talk. Like, super weird but cool. Hashtag keep Japan weird yo. I heard that. See, Monoma pointed up at Shoji. All they do is look down on everyone else. That's because I'm taller than you. he replied dryly. Momo leered at the other students, ignoring Shoji's response. Isn't that right, Ketsubutsu and Shiksu? He put his hands in his pockets. Right, he drawled. And not really. Shindo shrugged, rubbing the back of his head awkwardly, not sure how to respond to the question. Bit over the top for me personally, sorry dude. Kami mused, reaching into her side pocket and pulling out a hand mirror before she began to look over herself. So, we're all teammates then, Peter said, stepping up, already knowing this wasn't gonna be as easy as he hoped. 3 minutes, a robotic voice spoke over the video board. Mira was still snoozing up there too. Hope our last member legs it. I don't want to know what happens if we're down a man. Shindo put his hands on his hips. We'll be fine. Don't worry, El uttered. Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Peter took a deep breath. Him, Izuku, Shoji got along well enough. Kami, despite acting like a total airhead, seems to have a good heart. Shindo seemed friendly enough, while Elle seemed to mostly keep to herself. She may still be new to Japan given her lack of speaking too. Shizaki would be a great addition. While Monoma, well, it could be worse. This seemed like a passable tea. Oh, for fuck's sake. Shouta had his eyeglass up in the higher seats, since the lower section was reserved for the students. He found his students, taking note of Mira's rules as he spotted who was remaining in the whites. Oh fuck, he breathed. Bakugou Katsuki stood there, his tag being white, with the number being 44 as he walked towards the group standing outside the trailer. Everyone was staring at him, from those Class B clowns to some new guys he didn't recognize. Armstead was there, as was Deku. But him, Parker in his stupid new suit narrowed his eyes at him, and Katsuki glared back. The fuck you looking at? Fuck, Peter cursed under his breath, turning back around and walking away, eyes narrowed. Izuku winced. 3 of his own classmates being on the same team should be an incredible stroke of luck. But while Shoji seemed easy to get along with, Kaken and Peter together, this wasn't gonna go well at all. Peter abruptly turned away, marching, stomping into the trailer, and Izuku followed him. From an intercom they could hear the voice of the exam proctor. We meant it when we said you have to get reading. It's 1 in the afternoon now. You have 72 hours to find where the villains are going to attack. Best of luck, students. Move it, Deku, or all this much paper. Kaken yelled in surprise as everyone else began to file in afterward. Oh, wowie, that's a lot, Kami uttered as she walked in, others gazing at the vast collection of boxes, all filled with various documents throughout the carpeted trailer. Peter saw desks, shredders, a water cooler, and couches. The boxes themselves had titles too, all numbered and arranged in large stacks. Suspects, potential targets, criminal records, recent activities, official documentation, records, and miscellaneous. Okay then. Shindo whistled as he walked deeper into the trailer, Elle by his side. There's quite a lot of this stuff we're gonna need to comb through, he mused, running a hand through his hair. Well, shouldn't we sort things out first? Izuku asked. I mean, we do need to find out who the villains are, where they're attacking, and when. It's obvious. Moron the bomber growled back as he walked around the place, inspecting some of the boxes. We have 3 days, so the villains will attack then. Has to be a clue. Really? Monoma drawled on as he walked in, Ibara behind him. Or maybe that's something to throw us off. The blonde glared back at him. In any case, I don't think we will need most of our heavy equipment. Take off the cumbersome parts of your costume and get comfortable. We'll be here a while. Shoji spoke up as some of his eye-arms gazed around. Peter blinked as well, shrugging as Shindo removed his jaw guard and Elle removed her armored vest. He even spotted Bakugou setting his grenade gauntlets onto a desk close by. If I may speak, Ibara said, stepping up and gazing up at Shoji. I think it's fair that we nominate a leader for this team, since most prominent hero agencies tend to have, well, a leader. Should we bring it to a vote of hands? Shindo asked. Oh, that's a good idea. But we totally should have it at a majority. Kami said as she twirled her hair around. Since if we all vote for ourselves, but one other person votes for another, that may totes make things complicated. Good idea, Elle agreed, nodding towards her. Well, there's 9 of us here, so whoever gets 5 wins, Peter suggested. No, I'll be the leader here, Kaken growled out. Peter turned, glaring his way as the bomber walked forth, arms crossed. No one nominated you, Peter spoke, and Kaken rounded on him, glaring right back. Kaken crossed his arms. Who, then, you Parker? You're no leader. You're not one either, Peter hissed, stepping forward. I ain't following Deku, or you, Kaken growled. The green-haired boy started to walk towards the blonde bomber. As he did, Kaken turned, and Izuku winced under his glare. Well, Kaken, I mean, fuck off, Deku, this doesn't concern you. Bakugou hissed, not even looking his way as he glared at Peter. Don't waste your breath on him, Midoriya. He's not worth it. Peter scoffed. He turned around and sat on the couch. Kaken's eyes widened, looking stunned at the comment. No, more like insulted. What did you say? He hissed. Peter didn't even turn. He looked at his web launcher and tapped some buttons to show his smartwatch as he inspected it, not even paying Kaken a second glance. I'm fucking talking to you, Parker. Kaken roared, marching forward. Izuku paled, walking after him, hoping to defuse whatever might follow. Peter's eyes glanced up, seeing cameras within the trailer. No doubt the Proctors were spying on them. One of them out of the corner of his eye zoomed in on Bakugou's approach. Good. Then Izuku got between them. Kaken, calm down. We have to team up or else we'll fail. A house divided. Monoma drawled, sitting on the couch, clearly enjoying the show. It's clear as day that Class 1A is filled with problem children up the wazoo, who only care for taking all the glory, even if they have to ruin each other in the process. Peter gazed back at him, as did Bakugou. If anyone should be in charge, it will be me. After all, who else but the best of UA, to do all the box sorting and reading? He grinned at them, his nose practically pointed at the ceiling. And I've led my class pretty well in plenty of assignments and class exercises if I do say so myself. Momona, please, we are all in this together here, Aibara said, looking torn as she walked forth. Go preach to the choir, extra. Bakugou barked. No one fucking cares. Okay, this isn't good. Shindo rubbed his arm. We're gonna fail. Bell sighed, seeing little point in getting involved. I vote for Midoriya. He has the smarts and the know-how. Peter spoke up from his sitting on the couch. Well, you're just saying that to piss me the fuck off. He can't lead for shit and you know it. Bakugou barked again. Peter turned, glaring back at him as Bakugou bared his teeth in a snarl. Okay, who do you want to vote for? Because let's see our lovely options. The ace of Class 1A, who rips his own classmates' arms off. Someone who stammers like a shivering child and looks like a deer in headlights most of the time. And UA's resident silver medal Monoma leaned back, hands in his pockets. Can't stand to lead even a pack of puppies. Peter whipped around, glaring at the tuxedo-wearing blonde, jaw tightening at being reminded of his less-than-stellar actions. Bakugou did the same, judging by a mirror on the wall, reflecting a similar reaction. Monoma blinked, and suddenly that bravado shrunk under their combined stares. Silver medal, you say? He growled dangerously, turning towards him, hands open. Kaken, wait. Okay dude, can we all get along here? Shindo exclaimed, hands raised in defense. Welp Kami sighed. Least I can hit the malls with my besties ASAP. Good riddance, Peter mused mentally, reclining on the couch as Bakugou advanced towards a pale-looking Monoma, despite Izuku's protests. A feeling of illness washed over the green-haired teen's face. Peter saw the camera following Bakugou. Wonderful, I'm gonna kill your ass D. Enough. There came the crashing of a table, and everyone in the room bolted upright and turned. Even Bakugou and the surprised Monoma, the latter yelping in surprise. Shoji's arms had punched a dent into the table, his eyes wide with anger, his normal ones, and ones now forming on his arms. All of you, get your heads in the damn game, he barked, his arms extending and speaking as one. Peter saw a very cross-looking tentacle eye glaring down at him and at Izuku. Midoriya, Parker, get to the suspects and recent activity boxes and start reading. Peter blinked, turning to a just as flabbergasted Izuku. Sure. He shot up off the couch. Shoji's arms then turned to Shindo and Kami. You two, contribute by sorting through the criminal records and potential targets. Corroborate with Midoriya and Parker. Why you got it. Shindo just gave a shaky thumbs up, while Kami gazed up with her mouth open. He's speaking like a demon I saw in this one anime. That's totes cray cool, she said, a smile forming on her face. With all the voices talking on top of each other. She then turned, noticing a stairway leading down. Oh, what's down there? She mused, walking the other way. Shoji's body rounded on Aibara, who looked up at Shoji's main body with wide, almost terrified eyes. Get to official documents, sort by building codes, taxes, or whatever pattern you find. Alright, he turned again, glaring at Monoma who was dumbfounded. You can copy Quirk's right. Copy mine, and help me in overseeing how everyone is doing. Help Aibara as well. Keep your stupid rivalry out of this. Shoji glared down at him. We're not in class or B anymore, we're heroes in this exam. Start acting like it, or leave. One of the tentacles stabbed harshly at the door. Monoma was silent, sucking his lips as he tapped the larger teen. His sleeves bulged as multiple arms sprouted out and ripped his tuxedo to shreds. Shoji turned, glaring at bakugou. "You, stop acting like an ass for once in your life and focus," he growled at Class A's resident problem child. "I'm not following you, arms." The blonde glared right back, but Shoji wasn't backing down as his eyes bored into his shorter classmate. Raging red meeting boiling black. "I vote for Shoji." Elle raised her hand high. Shoji turned, seeing her. Bakugou glared her way, as usual. "I vote for Shoji-san too," Ibara exclaimed, Monoma turning in surprise. Bakugou rounded on her too. "Well, why not?" Shindo shrugged, raising his own. Peter looked at Izuku. He saw Izuku nod his way, raising his hand. Peter raised his hand in support. Shoji turned, taking a deep breath, facing Elle and ignoring the bear-toothed snarl from Bakugou. "Are you good at reading Japanese?" "Still getting used to it," Elle replied. "Can speak okay. Reading and interpreting kanji and katakana is a challenge." She looked to the side, ashamed. "Okay, you seem to have a combat quirk, correct?" "Yes, stick with me and help the others. Get them supplies, water, whichever and whatever they need. Offer help whenever you can." "As sure." The brunette nodded, trotting over to the supplies desk. "Well," Shindo's smile returned. "Was a little worried there, but it seems like we got our ducks in a row." He turned, looking at a sulking Bakugou. "Well, almost all of them." The blonde glared back at him, scowling as the black-haired boy looked towards Peter and Izuku. "He's like this all the time, isn't he?" he asked rhetorically. "Yes," Peter and Izuku replied as one annoyed and factual, the other sullen and disappointed. Bakugou, Shoji's voice seemed to have calmed down, but Peter could sense the steel behind his tone. "Handle the miscellaneous section. Sort by whatever patterns you see." Bakugou remained silent, glaring up at him as Shoji glared right back at him. Seconds passing between them. "If you don't want to be a hero, the door is right there," Shoji stated. "TCH. Bakugou scoffed. "Whatever. Don't get the wrong idea, I'm only doing this to pass." He turned, hands carrying his grenade gauntlets as he walked over to the miscellaneous section, setting them down before grabbing one box and going over to one of the desks. Shoji walked to a couch and sat down. His arms grew and extended, eyes going about. "I'll keep a tab on things and... whoa, there's a whole kitchen down here, you guys. Oh, and Ultra Eats and Ultra delivery codes for free food." Kami shouted, voice echoing from down below. "Totes rad. And I'm Yaoyorozu Momo, from UA." Momo introduced herself, seeing everyone else taking seats or leaning against the walls of the massive trailer they resided in. The group had just finished all of their introductions. From her count, there were 38 in total, including herself. Thankfully, she was matched with some of her fellow classic comrades. Hihi Kaminari rubbed his nose. "With Momo here, we're gonna ace this, no sweat." "Darn right." Hagakure's gloves were gripped. The girl pumped up as Momo smiled their way. "In that case," spoke the blonde girl from Ketsubetsu Academy, Nakagame Tatami, a hero prospect. She was dressed in blue with pink gloves and boots. "Should we decide on who'll take which?" she asked, eyeing the loads of boxes throughout the trailer. Momo looked behind her, noticing one pile larger than the other. "Was it like this for all the other examinees?" "We'll take this one then." Shishikura Seiji, the violet-haired boy from Shiketsu, stepped towards what appeared to be the smallest amount of boxes, a pile of 10. Momo noticed the labels on all of them, being suspects. "Oh, what makes you decide that?" said Nakata Nezumi, a rather small-looking boy with mouse-like features as he stepped forward towards Shishikura. "Only for a large shape to get in the way. Because Shishikura is the smartest kid in our school, the genius of Shiketsu High." A large gorilla-like boy loomed, arms crossed as he leered down at the smaller rodent boy. He was also from Shiketsu, Ikari Mako. "And I'm willing to bet that some country bumpkin ain't worth their salt to go through the most important place of all." Hey, you can't just decide for yourself here," Nakagame said, hands raised, not the least bit intimidated. "We should delegate on who." "And we are." Shishikura cut her off. "Ikari and I will handle these and dispense any information worthwhile to you lot." He turned around. "Figure out the rest, we can touch base later." "Hey, who died and made you king, huh?" Fujimi Romero, a boy with teal hair, narrow eyes, and a black button-up coat barked. Momo recalled he was from Isamu High, a smaller-scale hero school near Osaka. I asserted myself. Shishikura took his seat, selecting a box. He began to open it, continuing to drawl. "I come from a prestigious academy that does not care for putting on over-the-top spectacle with no substance." He glared towards Momo. "Nor do I come from some backwater town or some random school." He spoke with a straight face, and Romero only seemed to boil at that. "Calm down, Romero, no need to listen to this guy," a girl with a snake-like head explained, placing a hand on his shoulder. He has the suspects list here, Habuko, Romero snarled, growling at the violet-haired youth. And in case you guys have forgotten, we didn't get any kind of pamphlet or prompt. Everything we know on what to do is from those boxes. He pointed at the boxes that Ikari was stacking on a table, shuffling them about as Shishikura began to read through the documents. If you think I'm not going to give you anything, you're mistaken. I'll give you what you need. Likewise, I expect you all to return the favor. Shishikura glared back. Momo looked around. Throughout the introductions, she'd stayed with her own class. The rest of the students here were from other academies, and most of them were here by themselves. All too easy for tempers to flare. Now partner up. Me and Ikari will handle this. I suppose Isamuhai and the rest of you can peruse the criminal records folder. You're not even gonna give us a chance. What the heck? Hagakure complained. Shishikura didn't flinch as he began to look through the papers. Did you do work studies? Shishikura responded. That's not answering my. Answer me, or are you as deaf as you are shameless? Shishikura glared back with his good eye, Ikari letting out a chuckle. Hagakure's gloves flinched. Hey, quit throwing out insults, jerk. Kaminari shouted, standing beside her. I bet none of you went to any notable heroes to learn much of anything. Did you? He turned towards Yaoyorozu, save for her, but she was with one of the old guard in Yoroi-musha. He spoke with all the deference of one gazing at a feeble cripple. Yoroi-musha is an accomplished and outstanding hero, and is in the top 10. Momo spoke out, stepping forward. Ikari noticed, as he stood beside the violet-haired youth. I said he was old, well past his prime. Clearly grandfathered in on old triumphs. I worked at the prestigious agency of Crust. Shishikura elaborated. An innovative hero with his pulse on modern society, and a man who is willing to assert himself for the greater good. He took a folder out and began to read its contents. Those who stand up to lead, must lead. Show-offs you may be, I expect you UA students to accomplish what your school's reputation should imply. Plus ultra, now get to work, lest our proctors decide to fail us for pointing fingers instead of figuring out who our villains are going to be. Kaminari practically began to spark up, snarling through gritted teeth. Behind him, other members from other schools were already looking through the boxes, spreading out the information to investigate further. Momo sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. Easy Kaminari, just ignore him. Hey, said Nakagame. I think we should band together and... I don't believe Ketsubatsu is in any position to talk about who is in charge, Shishikura added, glaring her way. Momo had observed her mother haggle with numerous stock traders. She remembered how her mother would press on for a deal, a compromising bargain, or try to cut losses if a prospective partner was unwilling to yield. Shishikura was falling into that latter category like a comet. This is not good, Hagakure whispered as Momo looked at the pair of gloves. Yeah, he's a real dick, Kaminari added as Momo could see another group of students bickering. Romero was pointing fingers with a student who looked hairless head to toe. He looks like one too, Hagakure mused, as the hairless boy suddenly sprouted hair atop his head, as the two became more vocal. Momo looked around, noticing they had about 13 people in their group. Their trailers were connected, so in a sense this was supposed to be two teams working together. For now though, Momo said, turning to her fellow UA classmates, we need to find a way to solve the crime, without gazing at who our suspects might be at first. She looked about, trying to find some people to work with. Habuko seemed to be trying to calm Romero down. Shiksu gets all the easy work. It's not fair, Hagakure whined. Yeah, well, if Aizawa were here he'd tell us to suck it up, Kaminari muttered, before he turned and saw Momo gazing about. Watcha thinking about, yeah Momo. Potential teammates. She crossed out Shishikura and Ikari. They made it clear they had no intention of working with others, or are at least trying to strong-arm their way to the top. She saw a few other students working together, but they were telling off single straggler students, like that one girl from Ketsubatsu. One student with metallic teeth and wide eyes looked repulsed and walked off, half in disgust, half in frustration. I'll see what I can do. Kaminari, think you can get started on sorting things out on our end? Momo asked. The blonde perked up. Hey, you see all this, he said, gesturing to the mountain of boxes. There's no way we can cover this much in 2 days. We won't be able to. We can, Momo surmised. I'd have to imagine us having a miscellaneous case of this size and magnitude. Maybe a clue or a hint of who our villain will be, alongside their objective. The girl looked at Hagakure. Mind giving him a hand? Sure thing, yeah Momo. Hagakure's gloves gave a mock salute as they went over and began to lift up a box, opening it. Kaminari took a deep breath, nodded, and joined her, placing a box on a table. The black-haired beauty then walked through the trailer, going up to the snake girl and the masked boy. Romero turned, his narrow eyes glaring at her through his matte blue hair. Habuko's serpentine eyes settled on her, an unsettling sight to be sure. Hey, you're that girl from the sports festival, right? With the skateboard and hookshot. Habuko spoke up. Yes, Momo offered her hand. I was hoping that we could work together and sort through our caseload. Shiksu seems to have confiscated the suspect's box for themselves for now and… What, you want us to take your orders or something? Think you can boss us around? Romero asked sharply. His demeanor reminded her of Bakugou a little. Romero, calm down. Habuko elbowed him, and the boy winced at her. Forgive my classmate. We're all a little on edge now, aren't we? She gestured to the boy, who sulked before looking back, saying nothing. Momo nodded. I understand. And I'm not here to give orders, I'm just wishing to work together. As equals. Your group is the one with the gloves and electric guy, right? Habuko asked, as Momo felt herself being more turned off by Shishikura's conduct by the minute. Were he and Ikari the exception at Shiksu? Those Nagamasa, Urashi, and Utsushimi characters were not like this at all. You seem to know a lot about us, Momo observed. Let me guess, sports festival. Not entirely. My best friend is in your class. Habuko seemed to give a smile despite her serpentine maw. It looked creepy, but the tone of her voice and the way her slitted eyes softened showed the genuine sincerity of a normal schoolgirl trying to be a hero. A friend of Tsu is a friend of mine. You're friends with Asui. Momo's eyes widened, before she smiled, offering her hand as the red-headed serpent girl shook it. The pleasure is mine. All right, found some people who are compatible. Now too. Duh, I need some air, yelled a student, who stormed past some others and out the door, slamming it. Not so loud. This was going to be a long few days. They're breaking up quicker than I thought, Shouta muttered, seeing the students in the stadium below leave their trailers for fresh air. He can only imagine this was happening in other stadiums. They should be getting to work, not needing a break within minutes. Beside him, Ms. Joke shrugged. Can you really blame them? They're kids from completely different schools, and getting along is hardly something they're trained to do on a personal level. Shouta was close to giving her a sideways glance at the mention of working together, but stopped at the personal level. That was correct, in a sense at least. Working with rival organizations, even towards the same goal, could lead to a whole host of problems if maturity was an issue, especially with people that the students were unfamiliar with, which is why it was part of the test. People didn't care if heroes did or didn't like one another. Outside of meaningless publicity events, that didn't matter. When they could make their own agencies and hire their own, they'd get the privilege of hiring based on chemistry and relationships. For now, deal with the cards one was dealt with. Could have a lot of people blown away by your students' explosive personalities, right? Joke asked with a playful smirk. Shouta closed his eyes, breathing through his nose. Please stop. For the longest time, no one really said anything. A bunch of students that simply stared at one another after the announcement was made. It was a large group, the largest from what he could tell. Nearly 80 students from various years and schools. Then, slowly, they started grouping together, not by team, but by school. One school gathered with another, forming mini-groups within that room, drawing lines without a single word being said. There was one familiar face in Kendo Itsuka. She'd been looking everyone over, no doubt trying her best to find a moment to introduce herself, or at least establish some semblance of order into the small set of craziness that everyone had found themselves in. Shoto didn't really see the point. They all knew the rules and the expectations, after all. So then, how do you want to do this? Kendo asked him, unsure of what to do. Shoto shrugged. I'd say divide into groups and convene when we can. But that would involve setting up groups. Shoto glanced up. Both he and Kendo were looking at a girl wearing a Sei Academy uniform. If Shoto was placing the design correctly, she had a small Benny with her school logo, and a golden monocle over one of her blue eyes, silver hair cascading down around her head. Two other girls stood behind her, all of them wearing similar outfits, their hair color being the biggest distinction between them. A pinkette and a brunette. She approached, a small smile upon her silver-framed face as she stopped before the dual-haired boy and the red-haired girl. Seiko Intelli of Sei Academy. Pleasure to meet you, son of Endeavor. She bowed lightly. Nice to meet you too, Shoto said as neutrally as he could given the less than stellar greeting. Next to him, Kendo raised an eyebrow, but none of the Sei students paid much mind beyond a cursory glance. This is Kendo Itsuka, Shoto introduced, trying to get the ball rolling. Nice to meet you, Kendo said, bowing slightly. Intelli gave the red-haired girl an almost dismissive nod. Little more than an acknowledgement of her existence. Things here will soon escalate, she said, matter-of-factly. Frankly, if all my girls were here I wouldn't bother, but seeing as how we are lacking, I'll make do with you and my two classmates. Shoto's eyebrow hiked to his hairline. Not to be crude, but the ball's on this girl. He crossed his arms. I'm not your lackey. Oh no, of course not. The words and tone were as patronizing as the smile on her face. She reached into her purse, pulling out a thermos which she uncorked and began to sip from. But frankly, you and I together hold the best chance of passing this exam. Why is that? Shoto asked, tone as evenly balanced as his quirk. The girl closed her eyes soon after as she began to talk. Simple, as I said, things here will soon escalate. In about another 30 to 60 seconds a fight will break out. My intelligence can decipher the evidence presented here easily enough to allow us to pass, but I lack your brute force. My intelligence does neither of us any good if I can't actually get my hands on enough of it to read. Just as your brute force will do you no good in snatching up evidence you won't be able to fully decipher in time. Not alone anyway. She sat back in her chair, smirking as she reopened her eyes. Quite the pair we make, don't we? I am certainly not complaining with someone of your pedigree. How do you know this? Your quirk? Shoto inquired, once again ignoring the jab at his lineage. The girl seemed to preen like a peacock. Indeed, my quirk is titled IQ. My intelligence skyrockets as long as I drink tea, the information feeding into me when I close my eyes. The boost depends on the type of tea brand as well. She nodded her head, the pinkette bringing forth a briefcase, which, upon opening it, seemed to be jam-packed with various tea bags, a teapot, kettle, and miniature stove. As I said, you can be my muscle. She smirked at him slyly. And I your brains, Todoroki Shoto. Shoto quirked an eyebrow. Well, she sure is something. Kendo gave a very pointed cough, looking at Intelli awkwardly. Intelli raised an amused eyebrow. Oh, but perhaps I'm mistaken. One of you is versed in investigation and speed reading. No, Shoto admitted. It was true. His father had focused on physical training more than anything. Even though investigations were something that Endeavor excelled at, that was a lesson they hadn't reached yet. Even so, he knew the basics. Kendo spoke up, we should at least. Her voice faded away, catching sight of the rest of their little group. Shoto followed her gaze. Students from several academies had begun haphazardly looking through the documents. Careless, worse than careless, ignorant and reckless. Which started. Complications. Hey, don't throw them down, we need to look at them. Oh, piss off. You're making a mess, dude. We gotta organize them. All we need is the villains, right? Then we go for them. Shoto nearly sighed, even before the first real insult was thrown. It appeared Intelli wasn't just boasting after all. The girl seemed to sense his mood, smirking all the while at being proven right. Beside him, Kendo held out a hand, as if to reach out and stop them, only to pause when the volume grew. This isn't good. Behind them, a man stood with more hair than Shoto had seen on anyone else. He was tall, with a single eye coming out of his fur. It was that Shiksu student from before, outside the stadium. Mori, if you remembered correctly. It would honestly be best to try and save the documents before they're lost. As best we can. Shoto agreed, finally getting up and observing the diplomatic process self-destruct in front of him. Intelli looked exceedingly pleased with herself. I see you're from Shiksu. I suppose we can use your assistance, as you seem to have an observant eye to you. Mori Nagamasa, at your service. The furboy replied. Seiko Intelli, at yours. She gestured to Shoto, and the hairy hero in training looked his way. Take what you can, Shoto said. Don't bother asking or trying to break them up. We don't have time to waste here. Besides, he saw students begin to shove each other, not even paying attention to their paperwork. I don't think they'll notice. We're just stealing documents from them. Mori asked with a raised eyebrow. Borrowing? From their table, Shoto added. But what about the others? Kendo asked, looking unsure about the idea. Shoto raised a single eyebrow. Intelli let out a simple huff, brushing aside some of her hair. What about them? The Sei girl asked. This is a test, and if they're wasting time arguing, that's their problem. She held out a hand and snapped her fingers. Now, do inspect the dining area, girls. Yes, Seiko-sama. The girls beamed and trotted off towards the stairwell leading down within the tent-connected van. We've already fallen behind, Shoto said, holding out his icy cold hand. So we better get started. He turned towards his own boxes and began to open them. It was several hours into the preliminary exam, and Shoto was enjoying a cup of coffee outside the stadium. He got his phone out and made a call. A moment passed as the call went through, connecting with an audible click. Aizawa. It was All Might, in his shrunken form, going from the tone of his voice. What is it? I thought you would still be at the provisional exams. Are you free over the next few days? He asked, looking out the window. It was a beautiful blue day outside. Some scant clouds, but overall pleasant. I can be. But isn't Vlad with you? He could hear sipping on the other end of the line. Yagi must be sipping some drink or other. He's doing his own thing. Shouta muttered under his breath. Parker and Bakugou are grouped up together for the provisional exam. What came next was sputtering and coughing from the symbol of peace. "You're shitting me," he shouted in English. "I'm not." What came next was a heavy sigh. "You want me to come over?" "If you want," Shout amused. "I doubt your intervention on HPSC grounds will be seen in a favorable light though. Aizawa, I mean, it shouldn't be too long, right? The exam should be over soon. It's going to last 3 days. Sonuvabich, calm down," Shouta said sternly. How can I be calm? If something was going to happen it would have happened at the camp," Shouta intoned. "When they slept in the same building, ate in the same room and trained on the same grounds, away from their parents or technology, and away from you, the real you." Aizawa heard the symbol of peace's jaw clack shut. "Then why tell me all of this?" The other man spoke up after a moment. "Since this provisional exam is different from years past, taking place over several days rather than several hours, I had a feeling you were going to call and inquire. I figured I would tell you. You're placing a lot of faith in those two, Aizawa." Shouta sipped his coffee. "If they're going to become top pros, they're going to have to learn that sometimes they'll be grouped with people they don't like. It's an aspect of life. You can't be there to get between them forever." All Might was silent, taking a deep breath. "And if young Parker and young Bakugou have an altercation, Midoriya and Shoji are grouped with them, I imagine they would act as cooler heads. Although if anything does happen, depending on the circumstances, one or both will be expelled. You know the circumstances with Parker." He glared lightly at his phone. "And don't think I've forgotten you let Bakugou off the hook at the beginning of the year either. He's on thin ice as well." He could feel All Might wince. "That sounds rather harsh." Shouta sipped his coffee. "I'll let you know if anything pops up. For now, consider no news to be good news." "Okay, so we got," Peter mused aloud, sipping some water as he organized his notes with Izuku on their table. They'd combed through the suspects and recent activities and had grouped them all accordingly. "Pros. Our villains are going to be legit top pros, under new villain monikers at the very least," Shoji said as he sat at his spot in the center, eye, ear, and mouth arms extended all over. Peter looked down at the notes they'd organized and, so far, they had 4 potential villain groups. "So, what do we got?" "The IDs for our villains," Shindo mused, leaning in a chair with L coming by to deliver him some juice. Izuku went over to the billboard in the center of the trailer and began to tack on notes and pins with strings. A whiteboard was set up off to the side as well. "Here are our suspects." Izuku began to list them out. "First, we have the Hateful Eight, a group of creature rejection clan elites who commit villainous acts towards those with mutation-type quirks. Photos of skull-masked people in robes burning someone at a stake. Although thankfully, that someone was just a dummy scarecrow. They have kidnapped and murdered some people with fish-like quirks up in Sapporo, along with burning other mutants in Sendai, and have been spotted around Tokyo." Peter rolled his eyes. Even after, supposedly, hundreds of years, humans were still doing the same old shit. Then again, Bakugou proved people could be assholes for all kinds of reasons. "Flash, I miss you," Peter mused to himself, sighing a little. "Seems kinda vanilla if you ask me." Shindo shrugged. "Simple as they may seem, their acts cannot be forgiven for how heinous they are," Ibara added as she sat in her own chair. "To think that Death Arms would be in such a foul organization." She pointed at the sticky note, with Death Arms tagged near a robbed individual wearing bulky gauntlets with muscular arms, head underscored by a massive square jaw. Don't worry, Shizaki." Monoma patted her shoulder sympathetically. "It's all just an act, you know, for the exam. Think of it like he's performing for a play." Next up is the House of Black and White, an eco-terrorist group dedicated to the destruction of modern society and returning to nature. Izuku went back, pointing at the next photo, this time of individuals wrapped in skin-tight bodysuits with swirling black and white color schemes. They stood in a square formation, a rather imposing figure in the center of it all in a massive trenchcoat. They've been more active in the south around Nagasaki, and their attacks have always been at the front in order to make an impression. So, the villain group likes to be at the center of attention. They have been gaining influence throughout the country and Parker and I couldn't figure out who the villain was here. Yeah, of the villains we investigated so far, this one was a blanket. It's Gang Orca. Bakugou spoke out, sitting farthest away, as he combed through his own files before slamming one down. "One of the codes I picked up mentioned the sewers underneath the stadium. Assuming they're going to attack, I can't think of a better way than to get at our feet. That, and the extras in the photo." He got up and walked forth past Izuku and tapped on it. "Are Orca's henchmen. So how do you know all this?" Kami inquired. "I worked with him." Bakugou shrugged, before walking back to his seat. "Also, Orca is based out of Nagasaki. You sure about that?" Peter asked, and Izuku winced as he saw the glare Bakugou sent his way. The American narrowed his eyes back at him through his mask. You think I'm stupid or something? For now let's assume that they are Orca's henchmen. I mean, it does make sense given the villain team name they have, right? House of Black and White. Well, Gang Orca is a killer whale, so the coloring theme fits. Plus it connects to the ecological theme too. Ibara mused, nodding to herself. Whoa, that's like, totes smart, you know that. UA must be full of big brains. Tammy beamed, leaning in and smiling at him. The vine-haired girl blushed, fiddling with his fingers. Peter rolled his eyes and shrugged, ignoring the huff from bakugou as the blonde took a seat, still scowling. Okay, so that fits Gang Orca's description. What about the others? He asked as Shoji, who was rather quiet, looked down at the dossiers. Flame Emperor Mafia, or better known as Entei Yakuza, a Yakuza splinter group of sorts. They function in racketeering, protection scams, and real estate, Shoji said, pointing at the photo of several men in suits, one larger than the rest of them but covered in shadow, save for the flame on his beard. Dead ringer, that's Endeavor for that one. Shindo raised his hand. The guy has that Yakuza air to him, you know. Plus the beard totally gave it away. Who's next? Elle asked, no one bothering to argue with Shindo. Parasol, a secret society dedicated to controlling the government, with connections in various medical and military companies. Villain group seems to specialize in assassinations though, as the prompt has stated they're responsible for several targets. Shoji listed off. Can't really tell anyone apart on who or who might not be a pro-hero from the few photos we have of them. Peter smirked. Someone's totally watched those cheesy zombie movies once upon a time. He mused to himself. And that covers the suspects we have, Shoji said. Now, let's start tagging which of these villains will target what. Oh my god, we can't get anything right. Hagakure whined. A thump on the table followed by a muffled moan indicative of her groaning, along with her face right into it. This fucking bites, Romero growled, arms crossed as he glared at the organized papers in front of him as if they'd insulted his mother. I think I learned more on building codes and estate laws than my uncle. And he's a realtor. Habiko groaned, her snout against her fist as she looked drained. And Momo agreed. They had been covering the mountain of miscellaneous cases for the last 8 hours, and had made little headway. They were able to eat, go on a walk, and get a nap break on the couch. But with Shishikura and Ikari hoarding the suspect information to themselves and not sharing, they had little to go off of. Kaminari sighed, face in his arms. His mind had short-circuited without even using his quirk. Momo looked across the trailer, seeing Shishikura going through the files and whispering amongst his schoolmates. Ikari was prowling about, hands behind his wide back as the gorilla man would look down with a keen eye at the progress of other groups. It's dissolved into factions now, Momo thought. They needed to find a way to get the information. She looked up at the clock. It was past 8, and they had 1 more hour until their research period was over. Then it was time to head to the hotels for lights out, as soon as they were told where. She saw Ikari walk through the area, the gorilla man holding a pad of paper, making notes with a pen. He was gleaning what he could, no doubt to feed back to his own classmate. What would mother do in a situation like this? Hagakure, Momo elbowed the invisible mass beside her. Oh, I know that look in your eye, MPH. The girl's mouth was clamped as Momo put a hand over it. She can tell from the source of the sound as she gave a hush sound. Not so loud. Everyone in the group looked their way as Momo gave a small smirk. I have an idea. Mira-san. Yokimaru opened his eyes, moving abruptly as he saw an aide looking down at him. The tired-looking man rubbed his eyes. It's time, sir. He looked over, seeing his workstation. He got up, scratching his head as he smacked his lips. How long was that nap? He turned, seeing the clock. It read 9:15. The applicants have been waiting in the stadiums for the last 15 minutes, sir. We had to check on you, the black-haired aide said. Yokimaru looked his way before sighing. Right. Gonna need to look over some footage from the surveillance teams and go over their reports. The man walked over to his laptop, seeing the camera window open, and the many students standing outside their trailers. He moved his mouse over, turned on his mic and pressed record. Is this thing on? He said, hearing his echoes from the stadium around him. All right, good. The beige-haired man sat up and yawned. Congratulations on fulfilling day 1 of the preliminary exam. I hope you all did your research in an efficient manner. Now it is time to fill you in on your housing. He began to type, bringing up the presentation that the graphics team of the HPSC conjured up. The local luxury hotels have offered their services to us, and as I stated earlier, your tag will be acting as your de facto room key. He tapped on a command prompt. Your rooms will be assigned to your tag, alongside which hotel and the address. There will also be complimentary clothing for sleeping in these hotels as well, for pajamas or for going down to the dining areas, which yes, are free of charge provided you show your tag. Lights out will be at 10 for tonight, but this is tentative as we are treating you like adults in this situation. And most heroes tend to burn the midnight oil on a case like this, so whether or not you wish to follow up on this is up to you. Yokimaru continued. For tomorrow and the following days, however, you'll be able to work until midnight at the stadium, with the caveat of an earlier start time too, at 6 in the morning. That is when the gates open up. Of course, these will be when the gates to the stadiums open, not when you start. But I suggest getting in around 7 in the morning at the earliest. The graphics of the time and the day allotted presented itself to the students, so I recommend you show the results of your research by that time, as it will be the cutoff point for many of you, I imagine. Get the right results on the final day at the deadline of 1 in the afternoon, and you will proceed to the real provisional exam location going from the research you find. Get it wrong, and your entire team will fail. Now he began to open up a water bottle, leaving everyone waiting. Time for rules in the hotel. Just follow normal rules as you would a hotel, but do be in your rooms at 1 in the morning. Sleep is very vital after all, even if it is only for 5 or so hours. You will also be in solo bedrooms as well. You can use the dining area of the hotel for breakfast and late dinner. You can also corroborate with your teammates in this free period too a little more as well, with the change of scenery maybe providing a spark of sorts. And don't try to glean off of other agencies. Their information is completely useless, so consider it a waste of time. Yokimaru paused, taking a drink. That will be all for now, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Yokimaru cut off the broadcast and stood up, stretching as he could hear his arms creak. Welp, time to go over that footage. Shoto rubbed his scarred eye, forcing himself to stay awake. The little group that they'd formed had chosen a spot away from the given madness that had barely stopped. From what he could hear, the groups, such as they were, had now been firmly divided into camps and small cliques. Grapevine said that there were 17 different schools in this group. That's 17 rivalries, 17 grievances, 17 different methodologies and ideals contesting against each other, all certain that their rivals were going to try something to sabotage their efforts. Only the largest of hero firms had a comparable size of 80, firms like his father's and gang orcas. But those firms had firm leaders and requirements for joining, not to mention mature and experienced staff. Here, it was a free-for-all. Seiko used her girls to fetter out more information. Mori used his own brand of negotiation, along with the prestige of Shiksu itself, to pull together what disparate evidence he could. Documents, photos, bits of information traded to piece together the big picture, as it were. It was a mess at best, but apparently Intelli had enough to make a decent guess at the correct one. She'd burned through her finest brews for that result, on top of her classmates going about acting like cute secretaries, providing drinks or food, gleaning what information they could. But now, their group had a leg up on the others as to where the attack would take place. Now, to make sure Intelli didn't slip them the wrong information, he would not be letting her out of his sight until he was sure she wasn't playing him for a fool. For now, sleep would do him well, as it would the others. They'd had a productive day, even with the setbacks. I think we should be reaching out to everyone else once we come back. Shoto blinked, giving a sideways glance at his fellow UA student. Kendo was looking down at her file, face sour. Why? He asked, not thrilled at the idea of navigating through other, equally volatile teams. Well, we clearly don't have all the information, Kendo replied. I assure you, Intelli said as her group rose in unison from where they were sitting, preparing to leave the conjoined trailers. We have all the relevant information that the others have been keeping from us. Isn't that right, girls? They all nodded, beaming with pride as they seemed to relish in playing the dainty feminine spy. Kendo narrowed her eyes, but held her tongue as the group trudged their way towards the hotel. It was large, built for housing luxury patrons attending the Olympics, or even those participating in the now niche quirkless event. Once inside, it had some robots tending to the floors, cleaning, and some clerks behind the counter. Shoto spied some signs leading towards a dining center, but he held off on that, going straight towards the elevators. We're going for refreshments. The simple Ultra Eats menu for local cuisine would do so much damage to our figures. Seiko mused. That, and I must see their beverage menu to order more tea. I'm gonna get something to eat too. Mori waved, heading up to bed. Yeah, have a good night, Shoto replied, and the furry boy nodded as Shoto turned and marched off towards the elevator. Curiously enough, Kendo followed him step by step. A quick glance is all she got before the two of them stepped into the elevator. He waited by the control panel, while Kendo leaned her shoulder against the elevator wall. The door closed, giving them privacy. I still say we should be getting the others involved. Shoto didn't say anything for a long moment, yet he turned to look at her. Do you have an argument that can convince them to work with us? Maybe. Kendo frowned a little. Some of them turned me away too, probably due to me being from UA. Maybes won't help, Shoto said, staring at the mirror wall across from him. Besides, any goodwill within this round might not even carry over to the second. They're not worth the effort. He heard a scoff and saw a look of disbelief from the orange-haired girl. Are you hearing yourself right? Kendo asked, baffled he'd even say such a thing. Loud and clear, Shoto answered, even as the door slowly began to open. Right now, we have the best chance to pass, and I am not going to be ashamed to look a gift horse in the mouth. He didn't wait for her answer, heading straight out of the elevator as he looked down at his tag, the number for his room displaying on it when he pressed the side button. The small suite was exceedingly commercial, but it was good enough. He needed some sleep, to be rested and ready for what was going to happen tomorrow. Peter lay in his bed, looking through his phone as he read through some emails. Been talking with a patent attorney, huh? He asked aloud. Can I get a Cliff Notes summary? He asked, dressed in the new duds the HPSC provided. A simple white t-shirt and basketball shorts, along with slippers. Enough for traversing the inside of the hotel, and that was it. So far, going well, Karen said from his phone. I'm putting the final touches on what I learned from reading through patent law regulations here in Japan and abroad. With any luck, you should have full control over your now patented web fluid. Peter grinned, skimming over the correspondence and combing through it as something caught his eye. Karen Stark for a name, he asked, smiling lightly. Well, I couldn't choose Parker as we're not related. And Tony was, in a sense, my father, Karen replied, her tone softer as Peter took a deep nostalgic sigh. True, I guess, turning over in bed as he looked out, seeing the luxurious night skyline of Tokyo in the distance. He winced, feeling his stomach grumble as he looked at the clock. It read 11:18. I'm hungry. Getting up and putting his feet in his slippers, he pocketed his phone and grabbed his tag before walking to the door. Peter poked his head out, seeing some stray kids conversing with each other in the hallways. Their lights out was at 1 in the morning, so they had time to socialize essentially. Not seeing anyone he recognized, Peter walked down the hall to the elevator, stepped in and headed to the ground floor. He got there before long, getting in line at the counter as he made his order. Honey teriyaki chicken katsu with fried rice and string beans. He collected his tray, said his thanks and walked over to a table and split his chopsticks apart. Time to eat, he said, praising the meal in Japanese as was custom here before he got to eating. You're doing it wrong. Peter perked up, looking and turning to see a tentacle eyeball staring above him. He turned around, seeing Shoji approach with a tray of his own. Oh, hey Shoji. Parker, Shoji replied from one of his arms. Mind if I join you? Not at all. Peter smiled, gesturing to him to sit across as Shoji walked behind the booth and took a seat. His shirt was a tight fit, and Peter could see the strong legs Shoji had with his basketball shorts. Get the right size? Not really, Shoji shrugged. But I made a request for a bigger size to one of the HPSC clerks here on the grounds. I'll probably get a larger fit soon enough, he said as he set down his bowl. A bowl of ramen with steak, some seaweed, tofu, 2 halves of an egg, and some green-looking noodles. Veggie noodles, Peter murmured in English. Sort of. Protein substitute. They had it, so I took it, Shoji said as he took his set of chopsticks and presented them before Peter. Thank you for this meal, Shoji muttered lightly, bringing 2 of his arms together in prayer as the others formed into mouths. He began to eat with them as they finished forming. Peter could see the bulges go down his arms too. That's creepy but kinda cool, Peter mused aloud, though thankfully Shoji seemed to take it in stride. You haven't noticed my eating? Not really. We haven't had a chance to eat together like this. Peter shrugged as he ate. Well, maybe once or twice back at the camp, but we were all tired and ragged then. Shoji nodded. Mind if I ask you a question? Sure, Peter replied, sipping from some water. What happened between you and bakugou back at the sports festival? Peter stopped, pausing as he looked back to Shoji, his normal set of eyes looking directly at him. He set the cup down, leaning back in his booth. Why do you ask? I'm team lead, so forgive me for being blunt, but I've got to know whether or not your bakugou will end up sinking us or not. Peter winced. More him than me, he muttered. I'm aware, but you throwing fuel on the proverbial fire isn't helping. It's bad enough we have Monoma and a foreigner who isn't as literate in Japanese as you are. The last thing we need is infighting. Peter pursed his lips, looking away. You and bakugou have never been close, Shoji said. For what it's worth, I don't like bakugou either. He's an ass. He's worse, Peter growled. Why? Shoji inquired, unable to understand the logic. Bakugou was all set on beating you and being the #1 freshman at UA. You beat him on national TV and solidified your spot, even brought him down a peg for good measure. So why can't you let it go and move on? Why? Peter asked, glaring lightly at Shoji. You're asking me to forgive and look past someone like him? A fraud of a hero. Shoji cocked an eyebrow. So you're agreeing with Monoma that he's just a silver medal. If you're not first, you're last sort of thing. What? No, it's. Peter paused and leaned forward, his hand running through his hair in frustration. He took a deep breath, looking at the ceiling as he began to list off the reasons mentally. Bakugou Katsuki was a jerk, an asshole. He almost killed Izuku during that training exercise and All Might just seemed to ignore it. And that was without including his shitty philosophy and beyond abrasive personality. He didn't deserve to be a hero, not from what he'd done to Izuku back then or to Pony during the sports festival. And then what he said, in that locker room, and again in the arena, when he was beaten. Peter was glaring as he looked at the table, Shoji quiet and unmoving. The silence stretched out between them for a time. Peter glared at first but winced, looking away. He couldn't find the words. Shoji took a deep breath. Look, I'm not Aizawa, and I'm hardly gonna pretend to be by prying into your business. It's yours, you wanna talk or keep quiet, your choice. I just need to make sure both of you can keep it together for the length of the exam. Peter raised an eyebrow. So is he gonna be getting this talk? When I catch him conveniently alone, yeah. Shoji nodded frankly. Frankly, having a shouting match in front of the team isn't appealing. Peter gave a snorting laugh. At least Shoji was under no illusions on how that conversation was going to go. Though it also made Peter realize Shoji was effectively holding him and Bakugou in the same category. To be considered as bad as fucking Bakugou. It made his insides turn. Fine, Peter grunted as he looked at Shoji. You have my word. I won't aggravate him. Shoji seemed to sigh in relief. All right, thank you. His arms seemed to finish sipping up the ramen bowl, the bowl now empty as he began to dab his arms with napkins. You're our class's ace, but that doesn't mean you're perfect, Parker. I get that, he said, nodding as he slurped up his ramen once more. No one's perfect. I bet not even All Might is either, behind closed doors. Peter offered a nod, standing up. True, think I'm done sharing for now though. Good night, Shoji. The taller boy watched him, his gaze long but after a moment, nodded, not commenting on the only half-eaten meal. All right, have a good night, Parker. Peter got up, tossing the remaining food into a bin and started walking back towards his room. Why can't you let it go and move on? It was a fair question, more than fair. Peter wasn't one for grudges, never had been. But this one was easy to hold on to, because this one had hit so close to home. Real heroes don't lose. Came the memory. To lose is to fail. He reached the elevator doors and heard it ping by the time he finished the thought. Real heroes cannot fail, especially when half the universe was on the line. In the dark streets of the Olympic Faux Village, a pair of gloves walked about before a crosswalk. Not a lot of people. As the crosswalk turned green, she trotted across the street as others began to walk back from the stadium. Seems some people were still willing to burn the midnight oil. The stadium was still open, as expected of Momo's prediction. Toru thought to herself as she hummed a tune from those spy movies she watched as a kid. She made it across, moving towards some hedges as she carried her phone. She pulled it out, texting. Agent Toru en route to Intel, she said to herself, sending it before her phone began to vibrate in a ring. She quickly answered it. You don't have to go 0-30 just yet, Hagakure. Yaoyorozu's voice emerged on the other end of the line. And Toru, Inu, Agent 2 from the Super Spy cartoon series, always trying to catch up to Agent 1 and his exploits, and while she had none of his talent, she never gave up in being a super spy. Wasn't Super Spy a children's anime? Yaoyorozu asked. Shut up. Toru looked about, seeing more kids walking to and fro as she sat on a bare bench. Most people would be unnerved sitting naked, but for Toru, she was used to it. Gonna need a long shower after this, or a bath. My room has such a great bath. For now, just get to our trailer. If the stadium is still open, then hopefully Shishikura and Ikari are not there. They didn't leave when we left. Yeah. Then Agent Toru's difficulty just spiked up immensely. Gonna have to sneak around them and you should get a move on. Yaoyorozu mused. I'm getting texts from an Nancy Romero, and Kaminari is pacing in my room. And you're narrating to yourself. As expected of, wait, Kaminari-kun is with you. Toru blinked, ignoring that last comment. Hey, Kaminari-kun, you better not do anything lewd with Momo, she cried out, shaking her gloved fist in indignation. Hey, I'm not doing anything. Kaminari yelled in indignation. It's fine, Hagakure, Yaoyorozu said, her tone still soft. You should go dark now and make your way to the trailer. Text if you cannot call. Right. Agent Toru out. Hagakure hung up, and the pair of gloves carrying a phone hummed as she got up and trotted into the stadium, taking care to slow down and hide behind pillars and move accordingly to keep her gloves and phone out of sight from people leaving the stadium. As she made it past the gates towards her allotted stadium, she saw some men in suits standing before the tunnel, no doubt HPSC security guards. She had her phone and gloves hidden behind a fence from their perspective. How do I get past them? She murmured, looking back. She could see some people leaving the stadium. Her eyes drifted to a garbage can closed by the guards. An idea popped up in her head. She removed her gloves and set her phone down, keeping them hidden from sight behind the bushes. She tiptoed towards the suits, one a normal-looking person, the other having a nose with an electrical socket. She got up beside them and waited, holding her breath and looking into the tunnel with her hand on the garbage can. Some hero students were coming her way. Good. Sorry you guys, but I need to make sure my team doesn't fail because of 2 jerkwads. She thought to herself, waiting. They were near the can, one of them with arms long enough to reach his ankles. Now, she pushed the can as long arms moved past the guard and the can, shuffling away as the can's contents spilt and caught the guard in the leg, and some of Long Arm's teammates too. Whoa, what the hell, man? Asked a boy with a visor around his head. Huh? Long Arms asked dumbly. What's the big idea, kid? The normal guard asked, arms crossed as his fancy pants had some garbage on them now, such as fast food bags, cups, bowls, plates and takeout boxes. I just got this suit yesterday. I didn't do anything. Long Arms said sadly. Take responsibility for your actions. Socket Nose said, hand on his phone as he stood in front of the kids. Or else we'll phone in the proctors. I'm sure a point deduction for detrimental conduct will be more than fair for this. Way to go, Yuga. I didn't do anything. Now pick this mess up. The hero prospects got on their knees and began to pick up the litter, all while the invisible heroine in training scooted past the preoccupied guards by traveling around the other side, behind the other trash can. The hero prospects got on their knees and began to pick up the litter, all while a floating pair of gloves scooted past the preoccupied guards, traveling around the other side, behind the other trash can. Toru walked as quickly and silently as she could, finally out of the tunnel and into the stadium seats as she let out a breath of relief. She saw scant few people on the stadium grounds. Phew. She trotted down, putting on her gloves and carrying her phone once more as she went into a tunnel and into a ladies' restroom. She stepped inside for a minute and got her phone out. In the east bathroom, Agent Toru on the move. Toru murmured lightly as she texted Yaoyorozu and put her phone on silent. The girl exited the bathroom, walked down the steps and onto the field, going to her assigned bunch of trailers. Using her special phone case, she slid a compartment down to reveal her tag as she brought it to the trailer door. The door opened, and Toru walked on in. It was dark and empty, no signs of life as she turned on a light to navigate through the semi-office towards the area where Shishikura and Ikari were working. Everyone had put away the files in a neat organized fashion into folders or clips, but the Shiksu duo didn't. Their paperwork was gone. They couldn't have taken it. Toru whispered to herself as she began to move about, grateful for her feet now on carpet instead of asphalt and concrete, but panicking at the prospect of returning empty-handed. She began to look about their area, looking under tables and chairs as she went over to the file boxes and began to rummage through the suspect section. The boxes were empty. Toru began to feel a pit form in her gut as she looked about in their section again. Was she missing something? What do I do? She whimpered, slumping to the floor and sitting on her bottom. She sighed, kneading her forehead as she looked up. That's weird. There were notebook paper blotters on each desk for students to write notes. Shishikura's desk calendar blotter looked a bit too thick of sorts, like hiding a towel under the sheets of a well-made bed. She perked up, beaming as she lifted the blotter up, finding nothing before she set it down, and began to kneel down, looking through the blotter's contents. Lo and behold, the also important suspect files. For great justice, she cheered silently as she got her photos and began to take pictures, after which she began to send them immediately to Momo's phone. She then put them back in the blotter, putting the paper folds back under to make it look like it was not tampered with. She soon locked up the trailer, turning off all the lights. Super Spy Toru, mission complete. She murmured to herself, happy as can be as the pair of gloves and a phone walked towards the stadium exit. The next morning, Momo was rather cheerful as she saw Habuko and Hagakure talk to the other groups, informing them on what they had learned. So, it seems our targets include the House of Black and White, the Hateful Eight, the Entei Yakuza, Ghosts of Kyoto, and the White Falcons. Romero mused, pointing at some of the highlighted areas on some notes he had written down. Going by what we figured out yesterday, our most likely villain attacking the construction vista is Slam. Momo turned, as did Romero and Kaminari as they looked. A livid Shishikura loomed with his hands on their table, as did a growling Ikari. The fuck did you do? Ikari snarled, his fangs prominent. You stole from us, Shishikura hissed, glaring daggers at Momo. And you dare call yourselves paragons of society to uphold public order and decency. You're no heroes. You're thieves, criminals. No comment. Kaminari smirked. Besides, we just figured this out on our own, with all the research here in the trailer as per the rules of the exam, he said with a twirl of his finger. Shishikura, Momo cut in, seeing Ikari about to walk over towards the blonde's direction. At the end of the day, this is about all of us working as a team towards a common goal. She stood up, her face stoic as she took in a deep breath. What would Mother do? As much as she'd like to see her mother slap them silly, that wouldn't be her. Rather, she clenched her jaw and stared at the violet-haired youth straight in the eyes. If you don't like working in a team agency, I'm sure there's plenty of smaller agencies out in the country or islands. Okinawa or Tsushima for instance. But for now, let us work together and pass this exam and take that necessary step to become heroes. Together. If you want to go solo, play tennis, jerk. She added mentally, but better not add more fuel to the fire. You did this, didn't you? He leered, slapping her olive branch aside as he bore into her. You with your schemes and plots, just like all of you UA hacks. The moment someone challenges you for leadership, for prestige, for the top, you cut them out from under you. He glared at the gloves who were busy handing out some papers and notes to the other students, and the brown-nosers in this society who kissed their boots. Shishikura scoffed. Are even worse for perpetuating this. Romero laughed. Wow, I figured you for having a massive stick up your ass. He leaned back, hands behind his head. But now, I think you just need your dick sucked. Kaminari let out a sniggering laugh while Momo blinked his way. Why you? Shishikura was about to charge, hands having a glow to them. But Ikari held him back. Shishikura, the cameras, Ikari whispered, and the snarling teen looked up, seeing the camera looming down on them. Momo followed it, seeing it focus in. Romero let out a scoffing laugh, giving it a two-fingered wave. Shishikura removed himself from Ikari's grasp violently, and pointed his finger at Momo. This isn't over, he hissed. Come on man, let's just focus on how to pass, Ikari whispered, and glared towards the group before Shishikura stomped off, the large gorilla boy following after. Romero gave them the bird as they left. Was that really necessary? The dick joke, Momo asked, quirking an eye at Romero. The light blue-haired boy gave a lazy smile and shrugged. He's been asking for it and you know it. Preach. Kaminari offered a fist, and the Isamu High student returned it. All right. Hagakure cheered as she returned to the table, gloved hands going up with joy. We got all of our notes and flyers handed out, yeah Momo. Despite the setback, Momo smiled and turned. Shall we do this together, everyone? Romero smirked. Kaminari gave a thumbs up and Habuko nodded. All right guys. Hagakure cheered as she got to her feet. Let's go coordinate our notes together. We got 2 days to figure out who's our villain, when and where they're attacking, and why. She even did a skip to the whiteboard, bringing it over. So let's do our best. Momo chuckled and got up. Alright everyone, let's begin with our suspects. Shishikura looked away in disgust, and she could hear a few sniggers from the crowd. We have our target location. Shindo spoke up, walking to the whiteboard and drawing a line to one of the locations Bakugou had researched. The Apollo Tower. He patted the photo of a gleaming skyscraper of sorts. To be brief, there is an important conference being held there. Energy bigwigs from all over the world will be discussing the need to move from nuclear to solar power and whatnot, which makes it the ideal target for the House of Black and White, Shoji added, standing beside the black-haired youth, who all want to return the world to its natural state. Nuclear energy doesn't seem to suit their ideology. It matches with the building codes Shizaki provided me as well. Like, thank God because my eyes. Kami yawned, smacking her lips. Totes wanna kill themselves. Suck it up, Bakugou muttered, cheek on his fist. Peter paid attention to the presentation. What we can gather is that the conference will be held on the 2nd floor. There's multiple conference rooms throughout the building, but the motive for the enemy is that they want to hit highly populated targets. Shindo mused. Granted, it's odd for them to target a place where they're talking about potentially going green, but hey, it's villains. He shrugged. Where would the high population areas be? Izuku asked. From what we can gather, Ibara said as she used her vine to poke at some pictures they found. The representatives and their families will be staying on higher floors, meaning if the villains strike here, they'll need protection. Or evacuation. Elle added wearily. Indeed, we will need to take into account where the villains Momona paused, yawning. Are going to strike. Peter couldn't blame him. They had just finished the general gist of the research of the day. Looking around, Kami looked washed. Izuku was rubbing his visibly bloodshot eyes, and Aibara and Momo were looking more tired than the exam proctor. He was tired too. Only Elle, Shoji, and bakugou seemed to be going strong. Then again, those three were going hard on the coffee. Any luck on the building codes? Shoji asked Aibara, and the girl sighed. There were quite a lot of them. Many of them for other buildings like a hydroelectric dam, or a derelict building or a school. I have to sort them out in the morning. Which ones? Bakugou asked, actually sounding calm for a change. Sewer and property maps, blueprints. Aibara rubbed her eyes. Heaven forgive me. I can't go on reading and squinting at tiny text anymore. Do we have any clue if we will receive backup? Peter asked Shoji. Bakugou was the one to answer. Don't count on help. Peter grit his teeth, feeling Shoji's eyes on him as he took a deep breath, looking away. If other agencies join in, more power to us to allocate resources to save the civilians present. For now, let's assume we're on our own here. Midoriya, Parker, you finished up on your documents, right? Shoji inquired. Yeah, we have. Izuku nodded with a smile. Sorted them all up. Boxes are empty. All right. We worked a long day today and the day before, Shoji said, eyeing the rest of the exhausted team. Bakugou, how are you on your end? Almost done. Could get it done tonight if we work towards midnight. Happy for the non-confrontation from Bakugou, Shoji turned towards Momo. You help Shizaki with the blueprints. Parker, you and Midoriya do the same please. Shoji asked. El-san, he turned towards the American girl. Out of curiosity, do you have a surname? Just L is fine, she muttered, looking to the side with narrowed eyes. Shindo smiled, rolling his eyes as he looked at Shoji with a wry grin. Okay, you, Utsushimi and Shindo help Bakugou wrap up on the miscellaneous section in the morning. Bakugou perked up. We're not pulling an all-nighter here. We have until 1 tomorrow. And it's 8 now. Shoji looked at the clock to the side. Right now, I want all of us to be refreshed for tomorrow and at their best. I can go to midnight, Bakugou stubbornly said. Kami groaned out loud. If he's saying to call it for the night so we can rest, just take it. Peter muttered, earning a glare from the bomber. He is right, Kaken. Izuku spoke up, smiling awkwardly at him. Bakugou's eyes darted about, seeing eyes on him. Shoji in particular was staring at him intensely. TCH, whatever. Don't cry to me if we have to zero cram and jump to conclusions that'll cost us. Bakugou got up from his chair and walked to the door. I'm going to get dinner. He waved his hand dismissively, departing the trailer. Jodio Pendijo. Elle muttered under her breath before getting up and stretching. Let's go, Shindo. She reverted back to Japanese. I want to check out that burger place across the street from the hotel. You mean all works? Shindo asked as he stood up and followed her before he turned back. See you guys in the morning. We'll see you then, Shindo-san. El-san. Shoji nodded. Didn't she order from that place using the Ultra Eats app? Peter asked as he looked at Izuku. Food got cold. Shindo shrugged as he waved. Anyways, see ya. He beamed as he left. Peter looked at his fellow teammates, save Monoma as they began to clean up and shut down the trailer. Shoto tried not to frown, but it's starting to get harder and harder. Every other second, he could see Intelli scrutinizing the different pieces of intel that they had. Something wrong? He asked from his seat. The question was loud enough to get every head on their little team looking towards the white-haired girl. She didn't wilt, nor look annoyed at the attention she was getting, only gently putting her tea back down on the table before her. The data is complete, she said with a sigh, rubbing her temple lightly. Several cups of tea ordered by Ultra Eats lay empty in a wastebasket, alongside some plastic bags ordered by Ultra Delivery from various grocery stores. So, Kendo said, leaning against the pile of files that she was already looking through, we're good to go. Intelli's gaze sharpened. Don't you get it? She asked. The data is complete, she hissed, then rolled her eyes as she received a collection of blank stares. We've stolen and scrambled together a hodgepodge of information from various disparate groups, and yet it paints a clear picture. I barely had to strain myself to piece it together. She explained, we have enough to let us know that this Jutenrin will be the one to attack the bank when the time comes. 10 heavenly rings. Jutenrin, a definite Japanese-based crime syndicate that broke away from the Yakuza to ally itself with some Chinese triad. Their villain was an unknown, someone named Seikayo. Then what's the problem? Shoto asked, already dreading the answer. Intelli looked like she wanted to throttle him. She began tapping the rim of her teacup. The picture is too clear, she explained. There should be missing pieces, bits that we don't have. I should be making educated guesses, not having it handed over to me. What's more is that there's evidence suggesting other attack vectors from other suspects. There are bits and pieces missing for them, but not this one. So we got lucky. Mori shrugged. It can happen. The tapping stopped as she ran a hand under her chin. Her two fellow schoolmates who helped collect the information they desperately needed standing beside her. It was easily the obvious choice, almost deliberately put. Intelli looked to the side, and the dual-haired boy perked up. Are you saying there's a chance that it's a red herring? Intelli scrunched up her features. If it is, then frankly we've failed. There isn't enough time now to gather more evidence and find the real attack or rule out the possibility, she said, looking at the clock as it was going well into the night. Lovely, Kendo sighed. I do doubt it though, Intelli clarified, trying to stay confident. While I can't 100% rule out the possibility, I can say that this is the best option. For instance, half of these other tips are similar to false leads that occur in most districts that statistically lead to false alarms, even assuming that some of them are true. Furthermore, the possible attack vectors are too numerous to defend against. A slender finger reached out, tapping a map in front of them. This is the only attack that we can reasonably set up a defense for against all possible attack vectors. Shoto nodded, not as if he could argue with her. Then we work with what we've got. Too late to change things now, he said, arms crossed as he looked down at the map. Let's press on. Intelli fell silent for a moment before slowly nodding, though she spared a look at the pile of evidence with another wary eye. Toshinori awoke to the smell of bacon cooking downstairs, the skeletal man rising from his bed and stretching. He looked to the clock just past 7. Slept in, he murmured, rubbing the back of his head. He groaned as he put on his baggy t-shirt and slippers. He looked down at his custom watch, seeing his time back to full. 2.5 hours. At this rate, I won't be able to teach at UA as myself anymore. I'll have to think of a cover story. He mused aloud. I hope you get one for all where you said you wanted to by December midoriya. He opened the door and began to walk down the stairs. Toshinori sighed, walking out of his master bedroom and downstairs. He smiled, taking the last step downward before rounding into the kitchen. Good morning, my girl, he said with a light yawn. Melissa Shield looked up from her laptop, giving him a soft smile. A plate of cooked bacon sat close by her hand. Morning, she greeted back. It had a little more pep than it did the last few times, which was a good sign. He pulled up a chair, helping himself to some of the toast that Melissa had apparently made. She didn't look up from her laptop, the screen flashing through lines of code from the reflection on her glasses. Still hard at work, I see. Family quirk, I guess, Melissa joked, smiling briefly, only for her eyes to go back to the code. Trying to fit in the right materials for a blueprint I'm working on. He was a bit too old of a dog to learn something like coding or the ins and outs of support manufacturing. Thankfully, there was a conversation that you're never too old to talk about. You never did tell me what it was supposed to do, Toshinori mused. Melissa blinked, the realization rushing through her for a moment before a little flush of embarrassment came over her. Something for Izuku, she said, to help him while he's working on his control. The skeletal man perked up. That's good to hear. Such a development would certainly put Recovery Girl at ease. Last thing that she needed was another reason for her to unleash her arsenal on Toshinori. Not that she would seriously hurt him, but she had needles. Lots of needles. Lots of big needles. Shivering at that particular thought, he straightened just as Melissa pressed enter. I was hoping to fix it up and send it to him before the final started, she explained, fingers blurring over the keyboard. I don't think they allow outside help in the middle of the exam, Toshinori pointed out, especially for this one since it's over a several-day period. Melissa rolled her eyes in the way that only teenagers manage to do. I know, that's why I said hoping, she said, her voice losing that little edge to it. An idea came to him. You want to see the provisional exam for yourself. Melissa instantly perked up, eyes wide behind her glasses. Can I? Sure, Toshinori said with a smile. Don't think there's anything against it. And you don't have class today, so it's... He didn't get to finish the sentence, not as the blonde threw her arms around him in a quick hug. Toshinori let out a soft grunt. She was quick. Thank you, Uncle Might. Toshinori just sat there for a moment, right before he returned the hug, his dark blue eyes softening as he patted her head. There, that was better. Okay. Shoji stood before the whiteboard, all of their research displayed there. Complete. We have our target, our location, and the most likely avenue of when the villains will attack. He turned, and Midoriya put on his gloves before tightening up his boots. Parker put on his mask, attuning his web shooters as well. Bakugou adjusted his grenade gauntlets. "Are we ready?" he asked, and Momo in his tuxedo crossed his arms with a smirk, the toga wearing Shizaki beside him. Shindo and El were in their hero combat attire, and Utsushimi in her skin-tight catsuit. "What does it look like to you?" Kaken growled, turning towards the door. "Let's get on with it." "Yeah," Midoriya beamed. "All right." Shoji stepped away from the whiteboard. "Let's go. The enemy is at Apollo Tower. Everyone, let's do our best," Momo called out, the entirety of the trailer looking at her and her small team. Romero had his trench coat, breath mask and special gloves on, standing beside Kaminari and Habuko. Hagakure stood by the black-haired beauty in her blue catsuit. Beside them was the board of their target location, and the villain they expected to fight. "Man, I had my doubts that UA could keep it together, but boy was I wrong," said one student, Asagami if Momo recalled with his vacuum hose hands. "Same here. I thought they were all flash and no substance." Momo blushed lightly at all the praise. Shishikura and Ikari were in the back, glaring daggers. The latter practically snarled and gnashed his fanged teeth. The former was wishing he had lasers for eyes, no doubt. "Gear up, we have 15 minutes to get to our exam site." Momo took a deep breath, Hagakure and Kaminari by her side, and Romero, Habuko and Nakagame behind them as the trailer followed her. She saw other trailers emptying with their teams. She looked up, seeing a giant blimp of sorts hovering over the stadium district. On it, the HPSC logo was emblazoned on both sides. "Come on guys, this way," said a student as Shoto walked with his small group, right in the middle of the pack of the multi-trailer group. He looked up, seeing their destination. He turned around, seeing Intelli lug her briefcase, her classmates behind her. "I have a bad feeling about this," Kendo mused aloud, looking about as their group followed other students to their stadium. The teams looked uneasy, untrusting of each other. Many of them threw looks at Intelli and her two classmates. Mori walked to Shoto's side. "We'll have to adapt to what comes our way then," the hairy boy said. Shoto agreed, narrowing his eyes. "We have what we need. Let's pass, no matter what." "Well, seems like our students are in position," Yokimaru toned, sitting in the blimp overlooking the Fujitome district. He had a bit more pep in his voice, looking down as he saw the hero prospects move to their areas, the big middle area cleared. He'd never been on a blimp before. He looked upon his great console before him, tapping on a button to bring up several screens, various figures featured in them. "Is everyone in position? When you get the green light, engage in your roles." He gave a dark smile, seeing the various heroes who have volunteered for this task, as villainously as possible. He heard a chorus of agreements and Yokimaru sat back in his chair. He looked back, seeing Abe Hanako, the current president of the HPSC, gazing at him as the older woman stepped forward. "Is it wise not to inform the prospects of the Help Us company?" Abe asked. "There are civilians taking part in this. They'll be informed, rest assured." Yokimaru groaned out. "These are kids, and some of these prospects aren't first-timers." Yokimaru yawned a little. "They'll get a clue. Besides, the HUC members will inform them of their roles when they encounter our prospects, but not on their initial point deductions." Abe looked his way. "These exams are not a natural disaster event, but villain attacks. There is more margin for error since the conditions here are to protect or evacuate, not administer first aid or remove rubble and debris." He turned, seeing the collection of students all appearing at the gates they had assigned. The beige-haired man turned on a screen, bringing up a hologram of the various students in each tunnel. Their tags showed up on the screen as dots on the map, those who chose wisely in green, and those who did not in red. "Now then, time to cut the chaff. First with this lot." Peter looked up, he and his team standing close by in a concourse before their assigned stadium. He looked around, seeing a good 30 or so people present. "Any sign of any of our classmates?" he asked, whispering to Izuku. "No. Oh, I can see some of Class B though," he said, pointing over to a group of kids. Peter's HUD and his mask zoomed in, and he spotted Kamakiri and Kodai standing in a group of sorts. The big screen flickered to life as Peter looked around, seeing various HPSC officials in suits all around the concourse. That sleepy-looking guy, Mira, appeared on screen. "Now then, seeing as all applicants have arrived in your chosen areas, let us see who chose correctly and who did not," Mira said. "Look at your tags. Green if you pass, red if you fail." Peter looked at the tag he carried, and the white object glowed green. He let out a sigh of relief, and he heard the shouts of indignation and confusion all around them. "That's a lot of red," Monoma murmured aloud, seeing students yelling at the screen. He was right. He saw a lot of red. "I'm sorry, but you had 2.5 days to investigate. If there is anyone to blame, it is only yourself for not researching the material hard enough," Mira replied, ignoring one student firing a jet of confetti at the screen. For those who passed, remain where you are. Those who did not, please exit the confines of the Fujitome district. Your teachers are awaiting you. The security officials walked on over, going to some angry students. Peter even saw one of them put her hands on another and had to be physically dragged away. But most of them walked out, shoulders slumped, dejected and depressed. And more, and more. Okay, did most of them just choose this because of Gang Orca? Shindo asked with a worried tone. I mean, it was pretty telling of a name. Well, that and the Entei Yakuza being totally Endeavor. Might be. Elle mused as she looked about, the concourse becoming more empty by the second. Peter felt a pit grow in his stomach, and looking around, he could see most of his classmates had the same reaction. More of them were leaving, while Peter and his group were not. Before long, the only ones remaining in the concourse of the stadium was Peter's group. Izuku raised his hands towards a glasses-wearing HPSC suit. Is there a mistake? We can't be the only ones here, right? He asked. The suit shrugged and gestured to the screen. Well, it seems like of the groups intended to come here, we only had one of the two. And a bunch of layabouts. Nara mused from the screen. Well, congratulations Agency White 4. You have passed the preliminary portion of the provisional exam. Now, your mission. One of two, huh? Guess we have no backup after all. Shoji muttered to himself as he stepped up, looking up at the screen. Bakugou scoffed to the side, muttering told you so under his breath. We are an agency going in to intercept the villain group, the House of Black and White at Apollo Tower. Our objectives as heroes are simple: to defeat the villains and save the civilians present. Do you have a theory on what weapon the villains will be using at the tower? Mira asked on the spot. Shoji narrowed his eyes and Peter felt himself stiffen. Looking around, he saw Shindo bite his lip. Elle looked to the side and Kami tilted her head. Nope, they hadn't discussed what kind of weapon they'd used. General theory to attack a place like this was a bomb, so they'd gone with that assumption. But they'd never confirmed it, just assumed. Bomb, Shoji answered firmly. The sleepy proctor shrugged. All right then, best of luck Agency White 4. Then the screen winked out. After a brief moment of quiet panic that they'd failed, a voice called out. This way to your starting gate. A female official said, her big fluffy squirrel tail behind her contrasting her cold professionalism and black sunglasses. Peter saw words come across the screen on the eye holes of his mask. Normally I would help in combat and logistics, as this will be a combat simulation. But this is still an academic test, so, Karen said. I cannot help you here. That's fine, Peter muttered under his breath. All right, I'll be grabbing some popcorn. Your suit's functions are at maximum efficiency. Best of luck. Peter nodded and took a deep breath as he and his team made their march into one of the tunnels. Silent shade reigned upon the group. It wasn't a long walk, stepping towards a closed steel gate. Okay, the plan is simple, Shoji said as he turned towards the group. Due to us not having any communicators, we need to be within sight of each other ideally. But we have our team set up. Yeah, we make a line between the civilians at the conference and their families, and the villains. Shindo spoke. Me and Elle can handle things inside the tower. Question is, who's gonna be out? He was cut off as he felt rumbling beneath his feet. Peter looked about, as did everyone else. It felt familiar. Must be changing the field again. Shoji's arms were made into ears. Same kind of noises. Something big is coming up to replace the trailers. It has to be Apollo Tower. Izuku mused. After all, the documents we investigated and found correctly focused entirely on the tower itself, not outside of it. Indoor combat then, Elle said, arms crossed. This will be tough. My quirk is gonna cause some collateral damage here. Shindo winced, looking down at his hands. Buildings can be rebuilt, lives cannot. Ibara said softly, as much as it would dismay me to cause damage to the tower, but against villains, property should be secondary. More or less. The tall multi-armed boy nodded. Now then, let's go over our team-ups. We will split into 3 teams. Villain attack team, support team and civilian defense and evacuation team, Shoji said as he stood before the group. Now, once we're inside the tower, we need to be in control of 2 locations. The first floor and the second floor terrace. The attack team will be in the first floor to neutralize the villains, since according to the codes, they plan to attack from the side or underground. The House of Black and White like to make their attacks showy, so they always make some kind of an entrance. Team White 4, said a voice interrupting the taller boy as they turned, seeing a camera and a microphone attached to it. Your objective is as follows. You are a hero agency coming in to intercept the House of Black and White. There are 2 completion requirements for this portion of the provisional exam. It was female, professional and stoic. The first is the neutralization and capture of the villains. The second is the complete evacuation of the civilians attending the Apollo Tower Energy Conference. Completion of either of these two will finish this exam, as there is no time limit. Got a question? Bakugou stepped forth, glaring at the camera as Peter looked his way. Did you guys get actual civilians in this, or are they robots? The civilians are a part of the Help Us company, a company where its members practice playing victim for various hero examinations across the country. They will be playing the role of civilians, but they are quite experienced. They, along with the proctors monitoring your exam, will be keeping a close eye on how you act as heroes in this situation. Peter let out a sigh of relief. What are our passing requirements too? What determines if we pass or fail? Izuku added. Before completion of the preliminary examination, all examinees are at 100 points. Your conduct and acts during the provisional examination will have an effect on those points, decreasing your point score given your actions and the ultimate results quotient of them. The camera replied. It bobbed in the air for a moment. The pass-fail threshold is 40 points. Number of civilians captured or killed will add or detract from your score. Usually it is 50. But due to the failure of the other agency arriving, your agency will be given a slight mulligan. And rest assured we are taking into account the other team's failure to arrive in the stadium to help you in this score as well. You are not responsible for the other agency's failure, but the number of villains you're expected to face will not diminish. Take note, bad guys don't care if half the team is out sick. Peter mumbled, though it seems the proctor heard him. Indeed, once the examination is complete, the HUC volunteers and proctors will tally the deductions for your score. If at the end of the day your score is above 40 you pass, thus earning your provisional hero license. Where is the evacuation site? If we are in a tower, we need to know if we are using the safe rooms present or the outdoor area. Shindo inquired. It will be outside and is marked for your convenience. You will have to find it though. Thank you. Shoji nodded. Okay, we stick to the plan at first. Defense and evacuation team, Shizaki and Shindo, you'll be on the second floor. Attack team, Midoriya, Parker, L, Bakugou. First floor. Support team will be myself, Utsushimi and Monoma. We'll be on the second floor terrace between the two of you. We'll move between attack and defense, evac as needed. When I get to the second floor, I will focus on finding the evacuation zone. Ibara stepped up. You can move fast. L asked. Oh, she can, Peter said with a nod. Indeed, Shizaki is our class ace. Monoma preened as he gestured towards her. In an open area, she can roll the opposition like a bowling ball. Within closed quarters, she can use her vines to pull herself down hallways and rooms at great speeds. And best of all, she's more even-keeled than any of class. Yeah, we get it. Shindo cut him off. We're in your hands to find that evacuation zone, Shizaki-san. Or we take out all the villains. Bakugou added. That's another pass requirement. For now, let's focus on the plan. Shindo, provide defense. Shizaki, find the evacuation zone and return to us promptly to assist in defense. The civilians are the priority, Shoji commanded, and the green-haired girl nodded. Everyone else know their roles. Everyone else nodded or gave a thumbs up. Got it, Peter said, as he looked to Izuku who nodded back. He turned towards L. Hey L, what's your quirk do anyway? You didn't mention it back in our meetings. Shoji quirked an eyebrow, and Elle looked to the side as she felt eyes on her. She let out a sigh of frustration. Bone manipulation. I'm capable of combat, don't worry. Just don't get in my way, Bakugou growled. And don't fuck up either, I ain't gonna save your ass if you get yourself in trouble. Peter felt his teeth grinding. Bakugou. Shoji glared at him. Enough, Bakugou scoffed, looking away from the group. Elle looked at him, nodding lightly in gratitude. Typical Class A, fighting amongst them. Monoma, Ibara spoke out, interrupting the tuxedo blonde's rant. Quiet please, she turned, looking at him with steel in her eyes. The boy blinked in surprise at the normally passive girl being more aggressive before shrinking under her stare. Proceed now, the voice said, and the banter among the group died down. They began marching into the designated building, which was only a stone's throw away, about 10 yards from the starting gate. For a tower it was a squat thing, more like the foundation of a tower rather than a full-on tower itself. Made sense, not like they could just stuff a skyscraper into the arena. Making their way inside, Peter noticed the interior, the first floor being wide and open with some chairs, statues of All Might, and tables all making for a nice and scenic lobby for a convention center. Up ahead, he could see the stairs and escalators leading towards the second floor terrace. He saw a clerk behind the front desk, and a few of those fake civilians moseying about on the first floor, checking their phones. This scenery felt familiar, way too familiar. Yo, Midoriya, Peter spoke out. This is, yeah, Izuku replied. I recognize it too. This is like Tower's first floor. Why'd you say that? Kami asked. I heard there were some kids involved in that incident. Shindo paused, eyes widening as he gazed at Izuku and Peter. No way, you two were. Okay everyone, get into pause. Shoji's hand whipped out, stopping the team in their tracks as they were about to pass him. What is it? Monoma asked. Movement, Shoji said, one of the ears on his arms twitching, a lot of it. I can feel it too, Peter added, feeling the rumblings under his feet as if the entire tower was shaking. Already, Kami started. But, we haven't gotten into position yet. We just walked in. Don't think they care, Elle muttered, glaring. Where are they? She looked about. The windows and walls of the tower lobby were made with some kind of screensaver to imitate an outside view of sorts. Even if 10 meters beyond the windows was the stadium wall and seats. Peter strained, not hearing anything other than the low rumble of machinery that seemed ever present in these spaces. Then, his senses flared. Look out. Instantly, everyone tensed, just as a portion of the floor exploded close by. The shockwave alone was enough to push the entire group back, all of them landing hard on the ground. Izuku, Bakugou and Peter all recovered well, Bakugou's hands popping with sparks as he landed, and lightning arcing off Izuku's form. Peter landing on his feet and one hand. Peter heard Shoji groan, but he was stumbling to his feet a moment later. From the smoke and dust, a massive drill was now visible as a giant barrel-like tank seemed to be burrowing out as many of the civilians scrambled away in fear. The tank opened, and the first person to come out wore a thick black trenchcoat, almost looking like a cape. The towering villain walked forwards, with a confidence that none of the students felt as he stood upon debris. So then, these are the heroes in our way. Not as many as I expected. With a sweep of his massive hand, Gang Orca revealed himself. Dozens of people poured out of the hole, all donned in a black and white uniform with splotches. All of them had some kind of scuba board thing attached to their wrists, Peter identifying it as the trademark Gang Orca Agency foam pellet guns. Gang Orca smirked darkly, his red eyes glaring down on the White 4 Agency. Now, let's begin. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 21. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.